Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen meeting for Monday, April the 8th. If you're out assembled in People Street, and please start to assemble inside the chambers. We are so glad to see so many people here this evening. Our last meeting we had about 3/4 of the assembly or the council chambers were full, and tonight I can safely say we're at standing room only. We do appreciate having our students here and being able to celebrate and salute their achievements here in a little while. And speaking of students, we have this year's 2019 class of Leadership Germantown, and just raise your hands so the board can see you. They're all kind of sitting together. Thank you for being here this evening as well, and we do appreciate your attendance to the meeting. Almost misplaced my order of events tonight. This evening, our invocation will be led by our Public Works Director, Bo Mills. Our Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Alderman Forrest Owens. Please rise at this time.
Let us pray. Gracious God, Supreme Creator, Creator of all things, Creator of this beautiful season that we have here, this spring season, and for the greening up of the trees and the flowers and the birds, we just recognize you as our Creator. We recognize you as all authority. We just ask for your blessings to be here with us tonight as we conduct this meeting of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. We thank you for this great city, and we pray that the decisions and actions tonight would represent that great city as we move forward. We just thank you for all these special recognitions today and for all their many accomplishments, and just bless each one of them as they go forth. Lord, just be with us in presence, and we'd be careful to give you all the praise and glory. I pray in your precious name. Amen. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. That brings us to item number 4 on our agenda this evening. Setting and adopting the agenda. The agenda is published and presented to the public a week or so before our traditional meeting of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. During executive session, the board meets at 5:30, goes over as much of the agenda as possible. At that point in time, there was a request by an alderman to move item 9B, that would be change order number 3, Forest Hill Irene Road improvements, to move that to the regular agenda. That will now be item 17 on the regular agenda. So again, item 9B is now item 17 on the agenda. And obviously there will be no item 9B on the consent agenda this evening. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda as modified?
Move to approve.
Motion?
Mayor,
yes.
I was wondering if there might be a willingness by the board. We've got people standing here in chambers to move the special recognition up to the front of the agenda.
If it's without objection, I'll be glad to do that. Anyone object? Good. We don't need that in the form of a motion. There is no objection to it.
Thank you.
There was a motion. Was there a second? I did not pay attention to that. Was there a second on the modified agenda? Who made the original motion? Alderman Yonda on the motion, a second by the Vice Mayor. Please call the roll.
Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
Yes.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
The agenda has been adopted by the board. We move to item 5 on the agenda, approval of the minutes from the meeting held on March the 25th of 2019. There are no modifications or adjustments during the executive session. Are there any at this time?
No.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
Yes.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
Minutes have been approved. Now we'll move to special recognition. I noticed your frustration over there, Alderman Owens. I just thought I'd knock out the minutes real quick. That takes us to item 7 on the agenda, special recognition this evening. And as mentioned, we have several folks here and several groups here that we need to recognize, and we will do so at this time. Because we're honoring so many different people, I'm going to take item 7A and 7B, and our Vice Mayor will take item 7C and 7D. And I will ask for your patience. We have a lot of names we have to call out tonight, and with a difficult Italian last name, I know how important it is to try to get names as accurate as possible, but if I slip, then I do apologize in advance. First of all, we'd like to, this evening, honor Riverdale Middle School cheerleading team. And I'd like to read into the record the following statement. This year, the Riverdale Middle School cheer team competed for the first time at the state competition and made quite the entrance. After an extensive preparation, the team arrived in Murfreesboro for their competition debut in the junior high non-tumbling division. Riverdale was awarded first place, which granted the team a spot to compete at the national level in Orlando in February. At the national competition, Riverdale brought home fourth place in the junior high non-tumbling division. They also competed for the first time in the Whirls competition and placed third overall. Members of the Riverdale cheer team include the following. And if you're here this evening, if you could stand up and remain standing to be recognized, and then at the end we will clap for everyone from the Riverdale Middle cheerleading team. Marie Costa, Caitlin Cowan, Jade Dotson, Lily Fisher, Caleb Gordon, Kendall Haley, Maddie Hayes, Lily Hollinsworth, Anna Lee Jenkins, Sarah Mayfield, Mackenzie Riley, Avery Salvaggio, Lindy Schaefer, Gianella Vasquez, Katie Wiggins. We could all have a round of applause for these great... I know everyone's wearing their hardware because I can hear it jingle in the audience tonight. I'd like to also acknowledge Kelsey Woolfolk. You're the team sponsor, I believe. Are you here tonight? Would you like to come forward and say anything this evening? Well, let me tell you what. You should be congratulated for keeping this team together. What a great initial splash on the national scene and the world scene. So again, we as a proud PTO dad at Riverdale many years ago, we are so proud of Riverdale Middle School cheerleading team. So congratulations again. And now we honor Houston Middle School cheerleading team. And so again, I'm going to read into the record your accomplishments this year. And at the conclusion, I will read your names of each participating team member. And if you could stand and be acknowledged, and we'll hold applause till all those names are read this evening. The Houston Middle School cheer team is no stranger to the trials of competition. The team's record includes 10 national championships. This is Titletown, apparently. This year they competed in the TSSAA State Cheer Championship in the West Tennessee sectional competition of the large junior high division and earned a first place victory. This victory earned them eligibility to compete in both the National and World School Cheer competition in Orlando this past February. The Houston Middle School cheer team was named the national champions for the fourth consecutive year in a row. That's like four times. In addition, they also came in second in the World School competition. Members of the HMS team include Adley Aaron. Please stand when I call your name. Kaylee Argo, Marina Bailey, Isabel Bittner, Elizabeth Burke, Caroline Campbell, Katie Karayanis, Madison Carey, Addison Causey, Emily Earhart, Abby Gunnell, Izzy Hirsch, Presley LaGrasse, Lauren Lancaster, Shelton Lowe, Anna Noel, Anna Thomas Pate, Sophie Pierce, Caroline Reardon, Aaron Ramork, Essen Sechrist, Emerson Sells, Genevieve Stencil, Amelia Terry, Cameron Tilley, Anna Vaughn, Ella Watkins, Anna Claire Whiskey, Isabel West, Theron Wiley, Virginia Williams, and Abby Wright. How about a round of applause? we congratulate you, and that took a sip of water for me this evening. Ladies, 4 times in a row, I don't know how you add to your accomplishments. You must have one of the greatest booster organizations, greatest sponsor and coach. I believe that's Betsy Skurlock. Is that correct? Betsy, are you here as well? Have a round of applause for Betsy. Our sponsors are so modest. Would you like to speak to the audience this evening?
Oh my goodness, we have such a talented group. But I also want to say we have Chris Crabtree, and honestly, he's like the best coach in the nation.
Chris. I will now yield the floor to our Vice Mayor to take us through with 2 more teams. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. And I know Ms. Spurlock and certainly every one of the sponsors would say that parents are a great component of what makes a team a success. And there is no question that competitive cheerleading is a physically demanding sport. In order to compete at the level that they do each year, they must train extremely hard. And the Houston High School JV cheerleading team does that day in and day out. The hard work and dedication of these young ladies definitely pays off. Earlier in the season, the junior varsity team earned top scores at state competition, which earned the team a bid to nationals. In February, the Houston High School JV cheer team earned first place in the junior varsity non-tumbling division at the national competition. In addition, the team was named the world champions for the 2nd consecutive year in the same division. Members of the HHS JV team include Ashlyn Bialowitz, Tally Mae Bryan, Sydney Caldwell, Jordan Causey. If you would stand up when I call your name, thanks. Emma Davis, Jace Davis, Morgan Davis, Ashton Gary, Caroline Grazanti, Mackenzie Hall, Bailey Hamilton, Abby Hosea, Olivia Litvin, Amber Long, Gracie McKinster, Tanaya Riley, Reagan Scarda, Caroline Walker, Caitlin Williamson. Thank you, ladies. And Coach Crabtree, I know that you are eminently proud of these young ladies. I'm going to give you, after we talk about varsity, I'm going to give you a second, and we'd love to hear from you. The Houston High School cheer team has a tradition of success and boasts some of the most exceptional athletes within the Germantown Municipal School District. Similar to Olympic gymnasts, these girls have sacrificed months and sometimes years practicing tumbling and stunting. Earlier in the season, the varsity team earned a regional championship and a first-place victory in the super varsity division at state competition, which earned the team a bid to nationals. In February, the Houston High School varsity cheer team earned 2nd place overall in the super varsity division at the national level. In addition, the varsity team was named the world champions for the 2nd consecutive year in the same division. Members of the HHS varsity team include Grace Allen, Allie Bates, Meredith Bronson, Lauren Burke, Carson Childress, Savannah Harden, Michaela Hartzell, Emma Johnson, Caroline Jones, Macy Jones, Avery Kilpatrick, Kennedy Kuhn, Liza Leslie, Maddie Lewis, Sophie Lewis, Melina Long, Neely McKinster, Paige Moffitt, Anderson Perry, Jocelyn Prometheus, Abby Grace Rogers, Olivia Scarmastro, Gabby West, Hendrix Walker, Hattie Williamson. Congratulations, ladies. So I know Coach Crabtree is here as well as Miss Melissa Gray, the sponsor. Would y'all care to say anything about these incredible young women?
I'll let Christy know, but I do want to thank y'all for having and recognizing us. That's a big honor for us.
Easiest thing in the world for us to do.
I was going to say thank you for the support.
Support, literally? Was that like a cheerleading joke? Thank you so much.
one more round of applause for all of them. Now, all four teams, if you could exercise a small amount of patience, we're going to have item 7E, and we will make sure that our city HR director, who's going to make this presentation, makes it very, very memorable and very brief as well, and then I will kind of dismiss the audience that's here for just special recognition. This evening, we are honoring Healthier Tennessee for achieving the 2019 Silver Award from the state of Tennessee. Mr. Walensky?
So what better example could we possibly have of everything that goes into Healthier Tennessee than what's in this room? Congratulations to all of you. And actually, it's my last line, but I'm going to begin with as the first one. So yes, Mary, I already know I'm here to present this wonderful award, which is the Silver Award, which we're very proud to receive. But everybody who knows who competes, that there's something above the silver. So yes, next year, everybody, with your help, we will go for the gold. So, Mayor and Board, the Governor's Foundation for Health and Wellness launched the Healthier Tennessee Communities Initiative in March 2015 with 9 pilot communities. Germantown was one of the original 9 pilots and the first city selected in West Tennessee, based on our efforts to promote awareness and participation in physical activity, healthier eating, and nicotine cessation. In 2016, we received full designation as a Healthier Tennessee community. In 2017, Germantown won the Healthier Tennessee Community of the Year Award. And in 2018, we were again a finalist for the Community of the Year. Today, nearly 100 counties, cities, towns, neighborhoods, and college campuses are engaged with the program, and 33 have received a designation. Communities achieve bronze, silver, and gold status by implementing wellness programs in places of worship, work, schools, and in the community at large. I recently attended the Healthier Tennessee Awards Gala in Franklin, where I was proud to represent the city and bring home the Silver Award for 2019. 2020, gold. 2019, silver. We are one of only 4 communities, though, statewide to receive the silver designation. We have a new powder blue Healthier Tennessee flag, which you can see flying at the exit or entrance to GPAC and the Germantown Athletic Club. And in addition, I do have this plaque to display in our display case. I want to take time out for a quick special thanks to our Wellness Council co-chair, Alderman Forrest Owens, who's been with us along for the entire ride going back to the spring of 2015. Sharon Haley from my staff and many others within city government and throughout our community for your vision, guidance, leadership, time, especially volunteer time. We can't get enough of that. And continuing efforts on our citizens' behalf. So begin with the end in mind, 2020, gold. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walensky. Thank you for your leadership as well on the Healthier Germantown initiative. So we'll take a couple minutes break. All you ladies from Riverdale, Houston Middle, and Houston High, if you would like, you can stay for the rest of the meeting. I mean, we would love to have you, but if you'd like to go eat or start your homework or go practice some more, you can leave at this time. So we'll take about a 2-minute recess, and thank you ladies again, and thank you parents and sponsors. Well, that cleared out pretty quickly. We'll go ahead and regain and come back from a short recess. And we moved from the special recognition from item 7, we moved that up. So now we are actually on item 6, citizens to be heard. We have several sheets this evening that have been filled out. Let me read some of the guidelines for citizens to be heard, and then I will announce each person to come forward, and we'll give them some closing instructions in a moment as well. Citizens to be heard is designed to gain input from the public and not for immediate responses by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. The intent of this agenda item is to provide the public a platform to be thoughtfully heard and not a forum for dialogue, discussion, or verbal exchange with the board. While the board cannot assure each speaker of a specific or individualized future response, the board will consider the public comments and any supporting materials provided by the speaker. Public comments should be limited to 3 minutes per resident. Speakers are asked to refrain from using names of personnel or names of persons connected with the city, particularly when lodging a complaint. Speakers will not be permitted to engage in gossip, hearsay, make defamatory comments, or use abusive or vulgar language. And who would do that? So the first person who is signed up this evening, if you could come forward, that would be Tony Nygren. If you could come forward and come to the middle podium, make sure that the mic is green. Once you get to the front, you can adjust the speaker how you like, and you'll have 3 minutes to address the board. Yeah, your name and address for the record, and the green button needs to be on. Do you see it green? Okay, you'll have 3 minutes after you say your name and address for the record.
Tony Nygren, 1824 Johnson Road, Germantown, Tennessee 38139. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am here to speak against the proposed location of the cell tower at Dogwood Elementary. First, I want to urge each of you to go to this location that's been chosen right next to the first grade hallway, the field, and the playground. If you go during lunchtime, you will surely see that children play here daily, and that this field is also where they have field day. While currently there isn't conclusive evidence in the U.S. to prove that the radiation from these towers are harmful, many other countries have unbiased studies showing that they are. Children ages 5 to 12 attend this school at least 8 hours a day throughout the school year and now may be subjected to share their playground with a 140-foot cell phone tower and any associated risks. Currently, the FCC sets requirements for radiation levels upon completion of the tower, yet they do not further test what levels of radiation these children will be exposed to. There is nothing in place to protect our children, as the FCC does not require monitoring or testing once it is initially compliant. Did you know that there's a park directly behind the field that would move this tower further away? But it wasn't even considered. In fact, no outside location was considered because the contract was signed by the school board, so only the school board property was looked at. As I have said, this location is in a field next to a playground. And this is the area the contractor determined to be the least invasive. My question is, least invasive to who? Obviously not the kids that go to school there. In case you have heard, or as I've been told, other schools have cell phone towers. No other GMSD school has a cell tower this close. As a parent and a homeowner, I would never choose a school with a cell phone tower on the playground. When parents tour Dogwood and see the location of this cell tower, I guarantee they are going to choose another house zoned to another school. I know I would. Sadly, our neighborhood was recently rezoned, and we were unaware of the cell phone tower location proposal. Last week, I went to the school to look at the location and was completely mortified. I decided I had to do something to try and stop this. I am extremely disappointed that our school board feels that we need to be in the cell phone tower business rather than thinking about the safety of our children. Germantown can do and must do better than this for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments this evening and addressing the board, Ms. Nygren. The next speaker this evening will be Roger Shepman. Mr. Shepman, if you could come forward and state your name and address for the public record, and you'll have 3 minutes after that to address the board.
My name's Roger Shepman. I live on 1937 Whispering Pines Drive and have been a Germantown resident for over 40 years. I'm here to voice my support for the city to potentially purchase the Germantown Country Club property for our parkland needs. I would also like to congratulate the Board of Mayor and Aldermen for your action over a year ago to have the vision and leadership to do the Parks Master Plan study. I understand that there were lots of citizens' involvement in the master plan development, and the result was that the city needed more parkland to meet our growing needs. Then early this year, when the closing of the Germantown Country Club was announced, you again asked for citizen feedback on the possible support for the city to buy the GCC for our parkland needs, and the results were overwhelmingly positive. I believe the purchase of the GCC property is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the city to purchase a beautiful piece of property to meet our parkland needs. I fully support the city's actions to purchase the Germantown Country Club. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shepman, for coming forward and speaking to the board during Citizens to be Heard. Our next speaker this evening will be Mr. Paul Turner. Mr. Turner, if you could come forward, state your name and address for the public record, then you'll have 3 minutes, sir.
I'm going to read, if you don't mind.
That'll be fine.
My name is Paul Turner. I live at 9295 Enclave Green Lane East in Germantown, 38139. My wife and I bought our first home in Germantown in May of 1973, 46 years ago, and we have lived here ever since. This is in regard to our support to the city of Germantown to buy the Germantown Country Club property. I am vice president of the Enclave Estates Homeowners Association. We have 103 homes in the Enclave Estates, but I can only talk for myself and the other 4 board members. I can't talk for the entire ownership. As they say, I have skin in this game in Germantown. I own 4 single-family homes in Germantown and pay property taxes in each. I own Germantown Properties Realtors at Exeter and Farmington, and I pay Germantown business taxes. I can see great examples for the city of Germantown to own parks and property like this. The greatest one, I guess, is New York City's Central Park. Here in Memphis, we've got the Memphis Overton Park with a golf course. You all are familiar with Shelby Farms, the 4,500 acres just west of us. And if you've not seen Shelby Farms Park, the development that was finished the last 2 years, you need to drive through there. It will blow you away. Anyway, I do not want this property sold to a developer and lose this great piece of land for Germantown and my children and my grandchildren to enjoy, as we do the other great city parks. I support buying the property. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turner, for speaking to the board this evening. We appreciate your comments. Next speaker this evening will be Miss Alice Campbell. Miss Campbell, if you could come forward and state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes to address the board.
Thank you. My name is Alice Campbell, and I live at 1924 Whispering Pines Drive. I have come here tonight to represent my Whispering Pines neighborhood. We would like to express our support for the purchase of the Germantown Country Club property by the city for the parkland. I have lived in this area for 38 years, and I have lived in the house on Whispering Pines for 30 and 8 years on the other side of the golf course. In none of those years have I been a golf course property, but I have enjoyed being near the property and driving the streets and seeing the trees. I would be most grateful if our community maintains the trees and the property in the nature that it is. With the walking areas, I would like to have us consider a non-sports park that is allowing senior citizens and other citizens that would like to walk, maybe have outside yoga or just nature viewing areas. It would just be very grateful if we could maintain the trees. That's been a hallmark of our community for all the years that I've lived here. I'm not going to take much more time except to say thank you very much for your very serious consideration. And I would also add, I have property in Miami, and there's parks across the street that do exactly what I was saying. I'll be glad to share pictures, but they also have individual exercise areas that people, kind of like playgrounds for children, but for adults or for teenagers, cheerleaders, to exercise outdoors. That said, I would be glad to pay extra fees for the use of that property and would support in any way I could the development for our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell, for coming forward and speaking to the board this evening during Citizens to be Heard. That concludes the sheets that were turned in this evening for Citizens to be Heard. That brings us to item number 8 on the agenda this evening, Aldermen Liaison reports. Aldermen give reports on the boards and commissions they serve, and if we can please try to keep those within 3 minutes or less as well. Alderman Sanders.
Thank you, Mayor. The Beautification Commission met last week to conduct a post-Arbor Day event review. The Commission is now considering how to better serve those who are working and can't pick up their free trees during those morning hours. We also plan to select a community enhancement project at our May meeting, and the Beautification Business Awards will be implemented beginning this month through November. The Commission will not hold a business meeting in June or July during the summer break. The Senior Commission just wants to remind everyone of its annual spring seminar on the 11th, later this week, from 9:30 to 11 at the Pickering Center. I have some brochures out on the table outside with further information. Also, the Public Safety Education Commission met. We're continuing and looking forward to the participation in the annual drug take-back on Saturday the 27th between 10 and 2 p.m. at the Kroger on Farmington Boulevard and Walgreens on Poplar and Johnson Road. That completes my report, Mayor.
Thank you for that concise report. Vice Mayor Gibson.
Thank you, Mayor. I feel I've got several pages of a report that I will be shortening as I speak. The Germantown Education Commission wrapped up its 8th annual Battle of the Brain STEM competition over the weekend at Houston High. The goal of that competition is to energize students' interest in math and science and to encourage students to pursue careers in these exciting fields, to find new ideas through research, then translate those ideas into products to get those to the marketplace if possible. That competition was sponsored by Iberia Bank. I'm joined by Manjeet Kaur. She is part of the Education Commission who works so diligently. And if I could, before I speak to those exceptional projects and students, for months now I have spoken about Education Commission members meeting both in regular session and in subcommittees to prepare for this event. There's so many aspects, whether it's judging, just providing for the students' needs throughout the day. And so to those commission members, I thank you. Steve Chandler was a huge portion of those working teams as far as chairing that event. And to those founders, Dr. Dino Palazzolo and Dr. Stephanie Van Arsdale, we are very appreciative. The first prize award was awarded to a Houston High student as well as a Houston Middle student, and that was for defeating the opioid epidemic with advances in non-pharmacologic pain control meds. Second place was for an EKG diagnostic software, and there was a third place tie for a sensor watch for Alzheimer's patients and utilization of human body heat to provide energy for technology. Folks, these were brilliant projects. They worked months to complete them, spent time from their Thanksgiving breaks and Christmas breaks to do so. And so when the Einstein Award was met, it was much appreciated. The Parks and Recreation Commission met. They held their regular meeting on March 28th. Those important actions included updating the farm park rental policy to include school and youth groups, approving Phase 2 construction of the Farmington Park Playground project, authorizing Chairman Young and Parks Director Beasley to represent the interest of the commission in acquiring the Germantown Country Club property to advance the Park and Recreation Master Plan. They also approved the recommended amendment to the Parks and Recreation Policies and Procedure Manual to reflect current practices of the Parks and Recreation Director and staff, specifically to Parkland dedication. Library Board donations were given during our consent agenda to the tune of $1,918. Our Friends of the Library continues to amaze and go above and beyond, as well as others. And I would be remiss if, I know I'm out of time, but the Neighborhood Preservation Commission, April 28th, that is our tour of remodeled homes from 2 until 4 on Sunday that afternoon until 5. 2 until 5. It is a wonderful way to see old homes that have been redone, and we would love you to come out. It is a free event. That's my report.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Alderman Massey.
Mayor, the Historic Commission met, and we discussed getting bids for to plant flowers at the depot and also to restore some of the historic markers in Germantown. There was a recommendation to separate the responsibilities of the members of the Historic Commission and the members of the Museum Commission, which is a private organization. There's also a recommendation to catalog the historic documents of the city and come up with a written plan to preserve those documents for the future. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you for your report. Alderman Owens.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, the Design Review Commission met on March 26, 2019. I was unable to attend due to a conflict, but I do have a report on their agenda and the items. I'll be trying to be brief. There were several. They did review and approve a new wireless transmission facility at Dogwood Elementary. There was signage at Riverdale School. There was a wall sign for Mantra Indian Grill. There was a ground-mounted sign at Goshorn Aesthetics. There was a sign package and storefront modification for Altered State in Saddle Creek South. There was a approval of a dumpster enclosure at Joanne, also, the Villages of Shops at Forest Hill, and approval of a revised landscape plan at River Oaks Presbyterian Church. On April the 2nd, the Planning Commission met and only had one item, which was the Fulmer Farm rezoning, which was approved unanimously.
Thank you for your report, Alderman. Alderman Yonda.
Thank you, Mayor. I have the Retirement and Post Benefits Commission. We met, reviewed the investments with our commissioners and the investment team, and made no recommendations to any changes. Everything is going as planned. The Economic Development Commission, updates in the commercial districts with several new restaurants coming to Thornwood still. The Container Store next to Trader Joe's on target to open late fall. This assumes the rain will stop. There was one item reported from the chamber that is just really incredible. The city has been picked by PBS for a 5 to 6 minute profile of our community on the Information Matrix documentary. This will be hosted by Lawrence Fishburne. It will be seen in over 100 designated markets during peak and prime time on several networks, possibly hitting over 84 million homes. We're the only city in Tennessee that was chosen for this opportunity. Incredible work by the Chamber and the Economic Development Commission. Also, the Financial Advisory Commission is continuing to meet. We're in the process of reviewing the budget and the purchase of the Germantown Country Club. Last week's meeting reviewed the capital improvements projects and, of course, financial scenarios of the Country Club purchase. This resulted in a record 4-hour meeting. We're going to try to keep the one tomorrow night a little bit shorter. I also kept thinking there was another commission I needed to talk about, and that's the Environmental Commission. And while we didn't have a meeting, we do have Amnesty Day on April the 27th. So please put that in your calendars. I'll repeat it again at our next board meeting. Is that correct, Mr. Mills? Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Yonda. That concludes Alderman Liaison reports for this meeting. Nothing from the Office of Mayor. I would just like to remind the board as we move to the consent agenda and the regular agenda, please keep in mind that our board, we have 5 minutes on the floor. At our last meeting, we were working the nuances of our new clock system, and I think we've got that down to a science now. Also, please remember, let's stay germane on agenda topics and also direct comments and questions through the chair as well. That brings us to item 9 on the agenda this evening, the consent agenda. I'll go through each item and read that into the record. Item 9A, budget adjustment for fleet services. Item 9B was pulled, and it will be item 17 on the regular agenda. Item 9C, competitive seal proposal, authorization, video production services, and third-party administrator services. Item 9D, contract tennis professional services. Item E, contract video streaming and software services. Item F, contract water tower maintenance. Item G, declaration surplus property for the Germantown Fire Department. Item H, donations to the Germantown Community Library. Item I, donations to the Germantown Education Commission. Item J, donations to the Neighborhood Preservation Commission. Item K, a grant to Healthier Tennessee Communities. Item L, purchase annual cured in-place pipe. Item M, reimbursement payment number 2, GMSD Riverdale Boiler Chiller Renovation Project. All these items were thoroughly vetted and reviewed during executive session this evening at 5:30. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Alderman Massey?
Yes.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
The consent agenda is approved as presented to the community. That brings us to the regular agenda this evening. Item 10 on the agenda is a resolution 19R05 establishing a preliminary agenda for the city of Germantown. I will have the presentation this evening. The board is asked to consider the adoption of resolution 19R05 this evening. Prior to 1989, the current use of a consent agenda did not exist. After 30 years, the administration is recommending a change to this process to comport with majority rule, to create rules and guidelines establishing more efficient meetings. This time I'd like to go ahead, for the public that's here gathered and those watching on TV and streaming, go ahead and read the resolution into the record as well. Resolution 19R05, a resolution of the City of Germantown adopting a preliminary agenda to transact business. Whereas the City of Germantown conducts Board of Mayor and Aldermen meetings the second and fourth Monday of each month, and whereas the Board of Mayor and Aldermen have the authority by simple majority vote to create meeting rules and guidelines to establish more efficient meetings on behalf of the people of Germantown. And whereas the Board of Mayor and Aldermen desires to make said meetings more efficient by initiating the following. Position 1, or Section 1. The preliminary agenda will consist of items and orders of business for the people of Germantown to be considered routine in the course of normal business practices and generally traditional transactions. 2, the preliminary agenda will be fully presented during the Board of Mayor and Aldermen executive session. The preliminary agenda will be presented as a slate for consideration by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen during the traditional business meeting. Third item, items on the preliminary agenda can be requested for full presentation to the regular agenda portion of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen meeting by proper motion and second, followed by a simple majority vote to decide the question. Items on the regular agenda will follow the same procedures for requests to move to the preliminary agenda as well. That is the actual resolution for the record. I'll make a brief presentation and then entertain any questions or discussion. Over the years, or over the last year, I've had countless citizens contact me regarding the general decorum and the behavior of board members during our BMA meetings. The general comments and themes revolve around the following: respect, civility, meeting efficiency, maintaining germane discussion and debate, and the professional conduct toward our meeting participants, visitors, staff, and residents. In addition, over the last 12 or so months, it has become quite obvious our consent agenda has become less and less functional and moving away from its intended design. The consent agenda in its form today has become somewhat archaic, autocratic in nature, and has moved away from a democratic principle. Over the last year, we have witnessed in many instances the frustration of our entire Board of Mayor and Aldermen in the inability to move items from the consent agenda to the regular agenda and from the regular agenda to the consent agenda. Some of the items garnering the most frustration have been the most routine, and those are things like the process of approving board and commission appointments. The consent agenda should never be a forum or a format for autocratic actions, singular direction, unilateral action with no allowance for discussion, nor should it create tension and frustration for the governing assembly, which is the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. The proposal in front of you allows the Board of Mayor and Aldermen to reinforce the guiding principles and foundations of democratic governance, the rule of law, principles of majority actions, open governing, transparency, and most importantly, the will of the governing body. The board has this authority, and it creates and can create meeting rules and guidelines in the form of resolutions or agenda items. This type of action is supported by the BMA resolution established in the August of 1989 to establish a consent agenda, so a precedent has already in place and is there for the record. In addition, recently, the Municipal Technical Advisory Service gave the city an opinion that was requested by Alderman Sanders, and I thank Alderman Sanders for checking on the viability of whether this body can create its own rules and guidelines, and that opinion was affirmative that the city of Germantown can do that. Administration does recommend approval for this particular item. I am available for any questions, and prior to that, is there a motion to adopt Resolution 19R05?
Move to approve.
Motion? Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. The floor is open for debate or discussions. Alderman Sanders.
Thank you, Mayor. I did contact MTAS to ask a couple of questions about this proposed resolution. They did say that municipal governing bodies have latitude able to set agendas and meeting agendas and proposed rules. However, this current way that we operate since August of 1989 was adopted by this or a previous body that sat here on the dais. It's my contention that Robert Rules of Order does not allow a simple majority to change that, since they adopted the method of using a consent calendar. Robert's Rules says legislatures, cities, towns, and county councils, assemblies, which because of the heavy workload require a strict mechanism for a consideration of business, but which are called upon to deal with a large number of routine matters, may find a consent calendar, or consent agenda as we have been calling it, a useful tool for disposing of routine business. It goes on to say that matters listed on it are taken up in order unless objected to, in which case they are restored to the ordinary process by which they are placed in line of consideration on the regular agenda. Also in Robert's Rules, talking about previous motions and notice, it states that motions, excuse me just for a moment, motions that have the effect of changing or nullifying a previous action by the assembly, such as a motion to rescind or amend something previously adopted, the motion to discharge a committee, or a motion to postpone an event already scheduled, requires previous notice and can only be adopted by a majority vote. But amendment of special rules or orders requires notice and a 2/3 vote. So I contend that a simple majority would not be able to change this rule. Further, Robert's Rules state about amendment of bylaws. Bylaws should always be prescribed, or should always prescribe the procedure for the amendment, and such provisions should always require for at least that advance notice be given in a specified manner, and that the amendment be approved by 2/3 vote. So my question to the chair is, to pass this resolution tonight, do you contend a simple majority would be able to enact this resolution, or does it require a 2/3 vote?
Sure. Thank you, Alderman Sanders. Just quickly, we'll go ahead and read into the record the exchange between Alderman and Melissa Ashburn, legal consultant for the Municipal Technical Advisory Service on the question of whether a majority or if this can be taken up by this particular body. Alderman Sanders, Robert's Rules of Order does not address this issue. In my research on the topic, I instead looked at Tennessee law, the Germantown Charter, and Germantown Code for guidance. Our state law does not have sections applicable to agendas of governing bodies or their procedural rules. The subject of agendas only comes up in case law on the topic of open meetings and notice to the public. There is no language in our state laws addressing how a governing body sets its agenda or amends its agenda or its procedural rules. Likewise, there is nothing in the Germantown Charter on the topic of agendas for regular meetings. There are sections of the Germantown Code that mention items being placed on agenda in specific circumstances, which require that rules be amended by 2/3 vote. This applies to commissions or boards established by the city and has no application in the governing body, in my opinion. Tennessee municipal governing bodies are given great latitude in how they set and amend agendas and how they alter procedural rules applicable to their meetings. Based on my research, I find no requirements that this resolution be approved by a supermajority or a 2/3 vote of the governing body. Again, that's Melissa A. Ashburn, legal consultant with the Municipal Technical Advisory Service. The floor is open for further discussion. Alderman Massey?
Point of inquiry, Mayor.
Sure.
Last week, the clock did not continue to tick down when the aldermen were not speaking. Today
Sure. As I mentioned earlier, you have 5 minutes on the floor, and it is a running clock. At that time, we were kind of working out the nuances of the timer, and it was new, and so we were trying to adjust how to work it. You have 5 minutes of either asking questions or making rhetorical statements or debate or discussion.
I have a parliamentarian
We'll
inquiry.
have a minute 12 left or not, Mayor?
You have a 5-minute running clock. In December, it was voted by this board and adopted in a rule that the board has 5 minutes on the floor, 2 different occasions. It does not allude to any provisions of whether it's a question, does not allow for time in question and answer response. It just states 5 minutes to have the floor. Floor is open.
Parliamentary inquiry.
What is your inquiry?
Mayor, I'd like to know how the Robert's Rules of Orders normally treats questions and answer sessions so that we can determine whether or not it is normal process for that time period where someone is responding to a question to be excluded from an alderman's time. I believe that it is.
Well, as was mentioned, one moment. We have adopted a rule that implies that you have a 5-minute running clock. That is simply what this board
Point of order, Mayor.
December.
Point of order. That is not the rule that we adopted. We did not adopt that it would be a running clock. We adopted that we would have 5 minutes to speak. You were speaking in answer to Alderman Sanders' question. He was not speaking. And therein lies the problem.
You have made your point, sir, and so I have made my ruling on that. That is a topic for another day. Currently, we are
I'm going to appeal the decision of the chair to the rest of the board.
Sure. There is an appeal. It requires a second. Is there a second?
Second that.
There's an appeal to the board to consider the time frame allowed on this particular item.
May we have discussion,
Sure.
Mayor?
At one moment, I will allow the parliamentarian to weigh in on this a little bit. Go ahead, Dr. Schultz.
Anybody there?
You got it.
It's good to be with you, folks. This particular motion, the appeal of a decision of the chair, it appeals it to the assembly, and the assembly can decide whether the chair is correct or not. Not everything is appealable. If there is only one possible interpretation available, then that's not appealable. This, I would suggest to you, is an appealable item. There are special rules that go with it. The chair is allowed to speak twice in debate. first to explain his ruling, then each person is allowed to speak once in debate, then the chair is allowed to conclude with one more time to address any points that were brought up. When it comes time for the actual vote, there's very specific geek language that has to be associated with it. I'll be glad to give you the geek language when we get there. But that's the rules for the debate aspect. You get one shot at the debate.
Thank you, Dr. Schultz. So it's been properly moved and seconded. At this point in time, I will just restate that the item from the December meeting of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen was very specific in that it changed from a 10-minute time on the floor to 5 minutes. There were no specificity on allowance for anything other than there was a 5-minute time limit on 2 different occasions during debate. I yield the floor. Anyone else? Alderman Sanders.
Mayor, my recollection is it was 2 5-minute sessions, not one.
Well, that's correct.
So I believe the parliamentarian said 1 5-minute session, so.
That's just for the appeal. That's a special rule on appeal.
Oh, for the appeal. Okay. It's just concerning to me, Mayor. We had 10 minutes prior to December. We met in a executive session December the 18th to discuss this. That was less than 24 hours from my being sworn in on this board. There was a vote taken, and that was passed by a simple majority. A change in the rules requires a 2/3 majority, so I contend that original change to 5 minutes was done inappropriately or illegally. It was not a correct vote, so the change in the time limit to begin with, I believe, does not apply in this case. However, we continued to proceed. Last week, when the clock started, it only ran when the aldermen were speaking. As you know, many of these items that we deal with are technical in nature. Very lengthy explanations are given by staff. To now change and have the clock continue to run while staff replies to an alderman's question further hinders our ability to represent the public in a proper manner, to make sure that we ask appropriate questions, to make sure the public understands the full ramifications of items that are before this board and that affect them directly, and how their tax money is spent and how the city operates, how policy is set. So I contend that if we're going to allow that 5-minute rule to stand, even though I do not believe it was passed appropriately, we should at least, at a minimum, be allowed the 5 minutes only when the aldermen speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Further discussion? Alderman Massey?
I agree with Alderman Sanders' conclusions about the December meeting where the public was not given sufficient notice, first of all, of the discussion that took place regarding the minutes. I think that it was an invalid vote. I don't think proper notice was given, and then I think it should have required a 2/3 vote. Now, the issue at hand tonight is whether or not we're going to be able to allow the administration to obstruct our ability to fully represent the message that the citizens want conveyed on their behalf. In some cases, aldermen are in the position of being the minority on the board, but that doesn't necessarily reflect that they are representing the minority of the citizens in Germantown. In fact, the city is deeply divided. That was reflected in this last mayor's race. Mayor, I'll wait till you get finished speaking. Can you stop my time? Mr. Eisman?
Continue.
Oh, I'm sorry, you were talking, and I'd rather you not talk while I'm speaking.
Continue.
Okay. So, please listen to me when I'm talking. This is very important, Mayor, and you're the one that is determining whether or not we're going to be subjected to you monopolizing our time. So, I'm speaking as much to you as I am to the rest of the board, okay? So, we represent, probably each of us, an equal number of citizens in Germantown. And so for you and the administration to take the position that you can shut us down by consuming our time in lengthy, see, let me finish.
Well, Alderman,
Let me finish.
You need to stay, sir, you're germane to.
This is directly germane,
Your
Mayor.
appeal is about 5 minutes, not anything other than that.
This is exactly what that's about. It's about you monopolizing the time that aldermen have to represent the citizens of Germantown. Each time you begin an answer and you make a long-winded answer, or staff makes a long-winded answer, that precludes us from making additional statements on the record. That's unfair. That's unfair to the minority on the board, and that's unfair to the citizens that we were elected to represent. And so, in reality, when you take away our time, when you shut us up, you shut up the citizens. And that's the real problem.
Thank you, Alderman. Any other comments on this particular appeal? Alderman Owens.
Yeah, it was just to clarify, it was my understanding we would have 2 5-minute periods, and that would include the questions back and forth. I say I often speak, and staff I think will tell you this. I often call beforehand. I meet with staff. I know Alderman Sanders, you do as well, but I'm very cognizant of the fact that I do have the 5-minute periods, and so I want to represent my constituents equally and have them get all the information that they need. And so I do meet with them beforehand so I can, when I'm speaking, I can let them know about that. If I have a quick question, I will answer that, ask that of staff, and I can get all the information that they need, that I feel they need, my constituents, that is.
Alderman Gibson, or Vice Mayor Gibson.
Thank you, Mayor. And it's my understanding that we at any time can agree to suspend the rules that we have agreed to. Is that correct?
There can be a motion to suspend rules. You are correct, with a 2/3 vote.
So if we wanted to have further discussion on an item, if we were not satisfied with where we had gotten through those 2 5-minute sessions, that we could then request of our colleagues more time with a staff member, more time to delve into that. Would that be correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any other question or any other discussion on this item? That would only be Alderman Yonda. Thank you. Just to conclude the appeal, I would just simply state, I won't read into the record again, but Alderman Sanders took the opportunity to connect with MTAS and seek their legal opinion. Their legal opinion fortifies that only a simple majority is needed to set rules for a governing body.
Point of order, Mayor. You called that a legal opinion, but it's not a legal opinion. It was written by an attorney, but it does not have the force of a legal opinion, so that's misleading.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll ask the city attorney. Was the correspondence we got actually a legal opinion or something other?
It was an answer to a question posed by an alderman. It wasn't a, quote, legal opinion.
Okay. I stand corrected. Thank you for the clarification. As stated by the MTAS consultant, the city is in good standing as far as bringing a resolution forward on simple majority. Also, in conclusion, the city of Germantown has never formally adopted Robert's Rules of Order. It is simply a guiding practice. If you check the charter or any of our city ordinances, it does not specify the use of that particular tool. We do so by practice, but we do not adhere to those rules, and this body can set its own special rules, guidelines, and meeting rules. That concludes my presentation, and now so I would assume that this would need to be made. The question before you is, shall the ruling body shall the ruling of the chair stand on the decision of the assembly, as a decision of the assembly? All in favor of sustaining the decision of the chair will say aye. Those opposed will say no. So just to make sure that that's clear for the board. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Aye.
Aye.
No.
Yes.
No.
The chair's opinion stands and ruling stands. We return to the question at hand. Any further discussion? Alderman Massey.
I oppose this change because I contend it is a significant deviation from the agreement the board reached on the rules at the December 2018 special called meeting, when a majority of aldermen agreed to operate under the rules governing the consent agenda, which allows any alderman to move an issue from the consent agenda to the regular agenda for the full presentation and discussion. As far as the MTAS opinion goes, whenever I've gotten opinions from MTAS, the attorneys have said that they generally consult with the city attorney before issuing an opinion back to us. So essentially, often the times they adopt the position stated by the city, and they seldom do very much research in the way of providing case law or other precedent that would provide the opposition with evidence to argue against the city's position. In other words, they tend to rubber stamp the city's position on these issues. So the fact that you have an opinion from an attorney at MTAS does not mean that you don't need a 2/3 majority to change from the consent agenda to the preliminary agenda. Since 1989, the fact remains that the city has operated under the consent agenda. There is precedent for that. After last week's meeting, or the last meeting, we were also allowed to stop the clock anytime staff was answering questions. That too has changed. Tonight, the mayor claims that we are no longer operating under Robert Rules of Order. That's simply a guiding principle. So what I'm hearing is the mayor gets to make up the rules and the administration gets to dictate what the alderman can and can't say. That's a problem, folks. You have a mayor and then his unelected staff creating the rules for your elected representatives. It's exactly what's going on here. It's the reason things have gotten out of balance in Germantown, quite frankly, in your politics. It's the reason that a lot of the decisions don't reflect the will of the people, because not all of your elected representatives are being included in the
Mr.
process.
Chairman, could I call a member to order, please?
Point of order? What is your point of order?
No, member to order.
Clock.
Call the member to order.
Right.
Hold on.
This clock is still running.
Mr. Heisman, if you can hold the alderman's time. The Alderman Yonda, what is your
Yes, he
basis?
has repeatedly questions the motives of other members, including you, whom he mentions by basically your name, by mayor, and persists in speaking on completely irrelevant matters in this debate. I don't think he has the right to do that.
Point of information.
I appreciate that. Currently, I'm working on this particular request on the, and it's on calling the member to order. Instead of a point of order, calling the member to order. Alderman Yonda, I can certainly appreciate some of your comments. I would ask that, Alderman Massey, that you make sure that you contain your comments to what's germane. Please try to be a speaker that speaks through the chair without using names or positions, and stay focused and stay on course. Continue. You have the floor.
Point of
Please start the
information,
clock.
Mayor.
Yep.
Can you explain perhaps what you think, and this is a point of information related to the other, so don't start the time if you don't
Go
mind.
ahead, please.
So what exactly do you think I said? Perhaps it wasn't germane or basic. I'm trying to understand.
I did not uphold his appeals. So you
why
have,
would
you
you
have the
even
floor.
Why would you even speak to as if you were?
As chair, I have that ability to do so.
Yep.
You have the floor, sir. Would you like to
It
continue
was a
with the floor?
dilatory motion, and it should have been recognized as a dilatory motion rather than you pretending that I had done something wrong.
Would you like to continue to have the floor? You have
Yes,
the
I
floor.
do.
We'll continue with your statement.
The issue of adopting a preliminary agenda was defeated when Alderman Yonda first proposed the idea at the special called meeting to appoint citizen commission members in December. So, Mayor, why are you once again bringing the issue before the board? The legislative body chose to defeat this exact same issue in December. So why would the chair use his position then to attempt to override the decision that was made by the legislative body in December?
Is that in the form of a question to me?
Yes,
I made a presentation earlier, and I will stand by it. I was very descriptive on the feel that this board was not necessarily embracing the consent agenda as it was created, and I've already made my statement on that. Continue, you have the floor.
Point of information, Mayor. What exactly does that mean?
As I mentioned, I made a presentation earlier. If you would like me to go ahead and read it again and use your time, I would be glad to, but would you like to continue to have the floor?
No, I would like for you to explain the justification for this. And don't say that it expands the rule of law and it protects citizens and it creates transparency, because it does the exact opposite of that. So be honest with the people and tell them what the real reason is. And I don't want you to read from your notes. I want it to come from the top of your head. So go ahead.
I have answered your question. Would you
No, you
like to
haven't.
continue to have the floor?
Mayor, I just asked the question. I'd like for you to answer it.
Would you like to have the floor to continue to have the floor?
You can't answer the question,
I have
can
answered it
you?
earlier.
You can't honestly answer the question.
Sir, you are out of order, okay? You do not get to challenge anyone's motivation. You don't get to challenge what they think. Just speak to what you believe in. Now, continue. If you would continue, you have the floor. But if you continue on this pattern, I will relinquish that. Go ahead.
I'd just like to make a motion to amend this resolution. I have copies for all the board members.
Good. If you can pass that out, it would be great. You can pass it down. Go ahead with your motion.
I'd like to make a motion to amend Resolution 19R05. Starting in the third paragraph, the board will find that I struck simple, added 2/3 majority vote, and then I struck through to establish more efficient meetings on behalf of the people of Germantown. This change does nothing to establish more efficient meetings on behalf of the people of Germantown. I also corrected the misspelling from the administration of whereas, so I struck through the misspelled whereas and added the correct spelling of whereas in the next paragraph. I struck through in that same sentence, make said meeting more efficient by initiating, and I added in place of that language, adopt the following rules and guidelines, because these are rules and guidelines, and that was the language that was used in the previous paragraph, so I think it's important to stay consistent. In what is identified as paragraph 1, after the word business, I added that are routine procedural decisions and decisions that are likely to be non-controversial. Without that language, the majority would be able to put virtually anything into the preliminary agenda without discussion. So it's important that we still have the ability to pull things from the preliminary agenda for discussion.
Mayor, point of order, can we just state the motion rather than opining about
Sure.
each several entity of the motion, please? I think discussion
Yes,
is
go
over.
ahead. Go ahead and finish we have your actual motion here. Do you want to, and you do not need to read it in the record, we'll present it to the clerk. So you've made a motion to make wholesale changes to Resolution 19R05. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
I'm sorry, Mayor. I think I need to read it into the record. And I think I actually need to go through some of the explanation, just as you went through some of the explanation for your version of the resolution, and Alderman Owens did not object at that time.
Just read your motion into the record, or your resolution into the record. There'll be time for debate after you do that and get a proper second.
Clerk, can you tell me where I left off?
You can just go ahead and start from the beginning.
Well, I can't just read it. You have to identify the changes that have been made.
Would you like me to read it into the record?
You want to read it with the changes? How do you want to read it? No, I think I probably need to do a little explanation here. So in the second paragraph.
Now, just simply read your motion into the record, please, so you'll have time to be able to explain the reason during the debate. Please read your resolution into the record so it can be made in the form of a motion, seconded, and then discussed. Would you like to maintain the floor at this time, or would you like to yield the floor?
I'll read my motion in. I mean, it's just going to be a matter of reading the amended version of this.
That'd be great. That's what you stated earlier. Go ahead.
Whereas the City of Germantown conducts Board of Mayor and Alderman meetings the second and fourth Monday of each month, and whereas the Board of Mayor and Aldermen have the authority by 2/3 majority vote to create meeting rules and guidelines, and whereas the Board of Mayor and Aldermen desires to adopt the following rules and guidelines. The preliminary agenda will consist of items and orders of business that are routine procedural decisions and decisions that are likely to be non-controversial. The preliminary agenda will be fully presented during the Board of Mayor and Aldermen executive session. The preliminary agenda will be presented as a slate for consideration by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen during the regular meeting. Items may be moved from the preliminary agenda to the regular meeting on the request of any one alderman. Items not removed may be adopted by general consent without debate. Removed items may be taken up either immediately after the preliminary agenda or placed later on the agenda at the discretion of the board.
Thank you. That's in the form of a motion. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Let's just make it known for the record, this is an amendment by substitution. So just to make sure that the clerk has that in the record. So that is making it clear that all of this was substituted in the form of Alderman Massey's motion and the second by Alderman Sanders as well. The floor is open for discussion on the amended proposal.
And I'm open for questions from the administration.
Any discussion on this particular item? Alderman Sanders.
I believe this motion for substitution is well taken. It basically lets us continue to operate as we have in the past. We're simply changing the name of consent agenda to preliminary agenda. It allows for orderly business to be conducted in an efficient manner. I believe it lets any one alderman have an opportunity to pull items from any preliminary agenda that's presented, to be able to ask questions in the public forum, to allow the public to know the full ramifications of what it is we're voting on, whether it be legislation or setting policy in the city for the administration to carry out. It is the motion that the substitution that Alderman Massey is presenting does require a 2/3 vote, which I certainly contend would be necessary, whether it be his motion or the administration's motion, because we have, for the last 30 years, followed the Roberts Rules of Order. And to change the current policy that we've been utilizing for 30 years would require a 2/3 vote according to Robert's rules. I believe that it is appropriate that aldermen be given some latitude to be able to bring these items before the board and the public, because throughout the days after we receive our agenda packets and they're published on the city's website, whether I be at Kroger, the gas station, or at church, I have individuals that do ask me, what does this agenda item mean, or what does it do for the city, or what does it do for me as a citizen? So this change would allow each alderman an opportunity to address concerns from their constituents and also explain why they would vote in a certain manner on items that might appear on a preliminary agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Further discussion on this particular amendment? Alderman Massey.
Mayor, I would also like to point out that Section 129 of the Charter pertains to work and meetings relevant to boards and commissions. MTAS might argue that that language only pertained to boards and commissions, but it seems that this board has adopted the same position, and that section requires a 2/3 majority to amend the rules on agenda. It specifically states work and meeting pertains to, I'm sorry, I did not copy the actual language from that, but the point is it does require a 2/3 majority. So if we require our citizen commissions to abide by the 2/3 majority to change their rules, I think it makes sense that the Board of Mayor and Aldermen operate under similar rules and guidelines. So I think that also supports the position that we should require a 2/3 majority for any rule changes. And going forward tonight, I would anticipate that we would need a 2/3 vote to change from the consent agenda to the preliminary agenda if the resolution is not adopted.
Any further discussion? Alderman? Any further discussion by the board? Please call the roll. Only on the substitute amendment. Go ahead, clerk.
Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
No.
Alderman Massey?
Yes.
Alderman Owens?
No.
Alderman Yonda?
No.
The substitute motion and amendment fails. We return to the original question on the table. Any further discussion? Vice Mayor Gibson.
Thank you, Mayor. When we talk about openness, accountability, and honesty, that is the true definition of transparency. And each one of us, in looking at this resolution, we come to this board with a different way about going about our jobs. We have different perspectives. We, again, each thoughtfully and considerately move toward making good decisions. I've made no secret that I meet regularly both with citizens and with staff to understand items that come before me to make sure that I'm informed when I walk through these doors, that I can listen to debate and then make an informed decision. That comes in the form of our packets. It comes again in having those deeper dive conversations with the content area experts, our staff.
Point of order, Mayor.
Yes, what's your point of order?
Is Alderman Gibson's time with staff really germane to the question at hand?
I think in the body of her, what she's reading, yes, please continue.
In the past, I believe that we've been able to discern what's considered routine business and non-controversial, and I don't expect that to change with a preliminary agenda. I would say that if a colleague were to make a compelling request for more information that wasn't able to be provided during the executive session or prior to executive session, I would thoughtfully consider that request. Openness, accountability, and honesty define transparency. And accountability is the third key component in transparency. I believe that we'll continue to conduct the people's business openly, honestly, effectively, and efficiently by moving to a preliminary agenda.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Any further discussion? Alderman Yonda.
Yes. To my knowledge, for over 29 years, the consent agenda has been decided by majority rule. I know that it was decided for about 5.5 years of my 6 years as an alderman. This was changed last year on the advice of our city attorney. The consent agenda is made up of those mundane items that are technically required to be approved. These are donations, repeating contracts, grants, and purchases that normally would require no deliberation. As for the most part, they have already been approved through the budget process, those that have an expense to them. If there is one that we have a question about, we, the aldermen, have ample time to go to the maker of the agenda item and get further details. All agenda items are posted well in advance for everyone to see. In the 6+ years I have been an alderman, not one citizen has inquired to me about a consent item on the agenda. It is my belief that a single alderman should never have the authority to decide anything on his or her own. We have found that a single alderman making promises to homeowner association has been disastrous, and this change to consent has led to this new change has led to an incredible amount of wasted time listening to what sometimes is a manifesto on items that have nothing to do with that are on hand. We will still be able to remove items and place items on the preliminary agenda, but back to the 29 years of majority decision to do so. This is a fair and democratic solution to a problem. As an alderman, it is our responsibility to ask the administration before the meeting if we don't understand the item on the agenda. We don't need aldermen doing their homework during the meeting. This will result in a more efficient meeting that citizens could actually sit through on TV. The number of complaints, and these are all recent, needless to say, about our extended meetings is resulting in less viewers and less transparency of the process. I have little hope that this effort will result in a change in my colleagues' behavior, but it will certainly make it more efficient and hopefully less time-consuming meeting that results in less political grandstanding and attacks on our citizens, our amazing staff, fellow aldermen and mayor, not to mention those
Point of
who want
order,
to pursue
Mayor.
business in
What is your
Germantown.
point of order?
I really don't mind suspending the rules to let Alderman Yonda voice his opinion on this, but every time I speak on an issue, if I get remotely close to saying what he's saying,
What's your point of
he
order?
raises a point of order and interrupts me.
What's your point of order, please?
He's not germane to the topic.
He's not mentioning anyone specifically. He's mentioning aldermen and colleagues. So, no, those are things that are plural. They're not specific. That is the intent of speaking through the chair. So please conclude your
Point of order,
comments.
Mayor.
Yes.
Just in the comment, I just ask that you extend that same respect
I
to
would
the
be
other
glad
board
to,
members.
and I think I do. Thank you, though, for pointing it out. Alderman Yonda, please conclude.
Yes, this is one of the premier cities in our state, if not the country. I intend to keep it that way for not only my fellow citizens, but for my children and their children, who all live here and enjoy the benefits of our community. That being said, I intend to vote to continue a historical precedent of 29 years that is fair and a democratic solution that has made this one of the greatest cities in the country. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Yonda. Any further discussion on this particular item? Alderman Massey.
Citizens, what this allows the majority to do is determine or define what they contend is routine and traditional transactions. They can put virtually anything in that category. I contend that it is a misrepresentation to state that the intent of the resolution is to foster more efficient meetings or that it was created on behalf of the people of Germantown. The current resolution is designed to allow the mayor and 3 aldermen to prevent other aldermen from expressing viewpoints in opposition to the mayor's agenda. In reality, the resolution works against the people of Germantown by reducing openness, honesty, and accountability in government. I move that in the future, special recognitions and alderman liaison reports be made outside the regular meetings. If we're going to have a discussion about efficiency, I think that those issues should be discussed now too.
Alderman Massey, that is not germane to this particular item on the agenda. We will be glad to entertain those thoughts at a future board retreat or any other venue. If you'd like to express that to the city administrator and to your colleagues, we can look at it in the future. Please continue with your comments.
Well, Mayor, while we're on that point, could you explain what else you considered changing about the agenda rather than simply limiting the amount of time that aldermen have to speak, or whether or not they'll be able to speak on consent agendas?
The item in front of you tonight does not have any mention of time constraints. It only addresses whether we have a preliminary agenda or maintain the status quo.
Okay, we'll answer the second part of my question then.
What was that again, please?
What else did you consider changing about the agenda other than changing the consent to the preliminary and allowing the majority
no other changes, just what's in front of you this evening.
So why didn't you consider changing things other than those things that affect the minority on the board?
We will be glad to have that conversation in another forum or a different meeting or at a board retreat. This is what's in front of you, is adopting a preliminary agenda opposed to a consent agenda. We are open to ideas and anything about efficiency, and again, at another time. So please,
well,
you have the floor, sir.
I think when you say that you're open to the ideas from aldermen on efficiency or any other matter, I can tell you from my personal experience, residents, that that's not true. When I call staff, when I request information from staff, I don't always get a response.
Alderman Massey, we're currently
no,
on.
This is
it. This is not. You're not germane to the topic. Right now we are discussing Resolution 19R05.
Mayor, one of the reasons...
Your other thoughts and shortcomings are for another time, another forum.
Mayor, one of the reasons I raised the point of order when Alderman Gibson was discussing the time she spent with staff was because I knew I was going to raise this issue at a later time. And so I'm directly contradicting what you allowed Alderman Gibson to enter into the record, and it should be allowed.
We're having a debate on a particular item this evening. We're not debating what particular people's motivations or their opinions are. You can speak to their opinions and share what yours is. Sir, you have about a minute left, and if you'd like to conclude, that would be great. If not, I'll remove you from the floor.
Citizens, I'm at a loss. My heart's breaking for what they are doing to our traditions in democracy. I'm saddened. I wish there was more I could do for you, but you see what happens when you have a majority that is not reflective of what the majority of residents would want to see happen. They can beat me down as much as they want. The chair can shut me down, and I've fought and done all I can do tonight.
Point of order, Mayor.
I'm sorry.
Sir, your time on the floor is concluded. The floor is open. Anyone else discussion on this particular item? Alderman Sanders.
Mayor, I have a question for the chair.
Sure.
Do you agree that today our consent agenda number 9 had 13 items on it, and it served us well in preliminary or in our executive meeting? An alderman asked for one item to be removed, which was done at his request. And when item 9 came, we swiftly considered those items and voted on that. Do you agree with that?
The consent agenda was modified tonight, and yes, it worked very smoothly.
And that's the procedure we've been using for approximately 30 years. Do you agree with that?
That's stated fact.
It's not true. That is not true.
Well, point of order, is that
Point
correct?
of order, that the consent agenda has always been decided by majority.
Well, we've had a practice of whether or not, if something was in controversy, to vote on it, but we have discontinued that about a year ago. Please continue your comments, Alderman Sanders.
If that change was made at the request of our city attorney last year, and this body adopted that, I would ask the question then, does that become the current policy of this board?
The current policy of the board is any item on consent agenda can be moved with the sole one particular alderman moving that forward or requesting that.
Correct.
With or without opposition.
Then I would like to ask the chair, if that is the current policy of the board to change the policy, does it take a 2/3 majority vote to change the current policy?
The answer to that is no, a simple majority, as was stated by MTAS.
MTAS did not address that. I beg to differ with you. I ask if the policy required a 2/3 vote. The attorney simply addressed the ability of the city to set agendas. They did not address what Robert's rules says, that if a current policy is set, to change that policy requires 2/3 vote. I would ask you, does Robert's rules require a 2/3 vote?
This particular item was approved by the board in '89 by a majority. It is a operating guideline for a meeting. It was approved by a simple majority, and according again to the official from MTAS, that again, Tennessee municipal governing bodies are given great latitude in how they set and amend agendas, how their procedural rules are applicable to their meetings. Based on my research, I find no requirement that this resolution, meaning the one in front of you, be approved by a supermajority or a 2/3 vote of the governing body. Without being argumentative, no, she did not say a simple majority, but she ruled out the other two options. So continue, you have the floor, sir.
And I don't know if the attorney from MTAS is an expert in Robert's rules, but
well, you requested it.
We do follow Robert's rules, and we wanted to make sure we did so much that we are spending taxpayers' dollars tonight to have a parliamentarian here to help the chair. So I would ask again, I asked the parliamentarian and the city administrator in an email earlier this week, last Thursday. I did not get an answer if the change of this policy requires a 2/3 vote under Robert's rules.
The parliamentarian is prepared to answer that question quickly. Go ahead, Dr. Schultz. What is your point of order, sir?
But you cut Alderman Sanders off, and I'm not sure he was.
He will have the floor again. Hold his time, please, Mr. Eisman. Go ahead.
Under Roberts, this is amending something that was previously adopted. I don't know what happened in 1989. I wasn't here. But this board has run under the assumption that whatever was adopted in 1989 was the rule. To amend something previously adopted requires a 2/3 vote unless notice is given. If notice is given, it only requires a majority vote.
Thank you. You have the floor, Alderman Sanders.
And can you tell us what the definition of notice is given, please?
Go ahead, parliamentarian.
Everybody there?
Stop the clock,
hey, you're
please.
still here. Yeah, notice is, can be given when the agenda goes out.
Can we stop the clock, Mayor?
Sure. Please hold the clock.
Notice can happen a couple of different ways. It can happen in a meeting. It can happen when the agenda goes out, as long as the agenda doesn't go out just before the meeting. You have to have at least a few days to be aware of it. But that's notice. Notice has been given.
Thank you, parliamentarian. You have the floor.
Okay, I'll just point out to the public that we did discuss this at length in December in a executive session or a work session of this board at the request of Alderman Yonda. There was lengthy discussion, and at that time, no one voted to make this change. Now this change comes, similar to some other changes that occurred after discussion that night. A magnetometer being used out in our hallway, a parliamentarian being placed on the board. I just want the public to know that I am trying to help you know what's going on in our city. I believe this is bad policy. I believe things can be placed on this agenda if it passes tonight that will not let you be fully aware of the ramifications of the policies and procedures that are getting ready to be set.
Thank you, Alderman. That concludes your time on the floor. Is there further discussion? Alderman Owens.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'll be brief. I do have just a couple of remarks. I have been contacted by multiple residents, business owners, staff members, about the decorum, lack of decorum, and the longevity at our meetings, and I intend to fight for those residents, similar to my colleagues. It is my opinion that this resolution is about transparency, and it's also more about efficiency. Furthermore, it is my belief that this resolution would not be necessary if our meetings, or I had not witnessed our meetings, be drug out from what should be rudimentary items on the agenda, 1-hour meetings, to 3+ 4-hour meetings repeatedly. I've witnessed bullying and attempts to intimidate our professional staff. I've witnessed insinuations that staff members were illegally benefiting from decisions that made. I've witnessed repeatedly.
What is your point of information, sir, or your point of order?
Well, I would like for Alderman Owens to specify the times that staff has been bullied in these items that he claims
sir,
that he's seen.
You don't have that. You don't have that option to do that. He has the floor. He has the time to speak. Go ahead, Alderman Owens.
So certainly,
Sir,
just a couple of meetings ago, you
Sir,
insinuated.
I'm sorry, Alderman Owens, this is not a debate and discussion between the two of you. This goes through the chair. So you have the floor, Alderman Owens, please.
Let's suspend the rules so Alderman Owens can tell us.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to finish my comments. I was allowing you to finish your comments.
Go
I wish you'd.
Alderman Owens, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much. So as I said, our staff has been intimidated. It's been insinuated that they have benefited illegally from decisions that they have made. I've witnessed repeated attempts to delay and deny and derail mundane agenda items that have been brought before us. And finally, I've witnessed a colleague attempt to attack, belittle, and discredit the names of the mayor and other aldermen simply because they disagree with his point of view. I believe that, I don't for one second believe that this remedy will completely eliminate that conduct, but I am proud and pleased to vote for this resolution if it reduces this conduct in just a little fashion. I thank the mayor and their administration for bringing this forward.
Thank you, Alderman. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Can you pose the question again, Mayor?
The question on the table is to adopt Resolution 19-R05. Please call the roll.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes, absolutely.
Alderman Sanders?
Absolutely not.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
No.
Thank you. The resolution carries. Appreciate the support of the board on this particular matter. That brings us to item 11 on the agenda this evening, contract, Western Gateway Sanitary Sewer System. Mr. Mills.
Let's talk some sewer. I'd like to introduce a member of my staff, Andy Sanders is here, and also I have our consultant engineer, Mr. Ben Pearson, and our bidder contractor, Mr. Tommy Sanders is here in the audience with us tonight. The agenda item that you have before you here is for a construction contract with Memphis Boring Company in the amount of $1,518,719 for our Western Gateway Sewer Project. This project includes the installation of 3,200 feet of 12-inch gravity sewer, including 12 manholes, using a grade-sensitive, close-tolerance directional boring process to serve our Western Gateway Smart Area Plan. 5 times since November of 2013, this board has supported staff to accomplish this infrastructure extension, which will provide adequate sewer facilities to the area without causing sanitary sewer problems for the residential neighborhoods where this sewer would flow. This sewer line will serve as a dedicated line to the Western Gateway area, protecting the existing 55-year-old sewer system and supporting the 102 residents that live along Oak Hill, Great Oaks, and Brookside Drive. As developments in this Western Gateway small area planning zone come forward, each will pay for their pro rata share of the cost of this improvement based on their particular development contracts. Board Mayor, the Public Works has used this type of grade-sensitive directional boring technique with great success. With the advice of our consultant, Allen and Hoschel, we believe this process to be the best way to accomplish this installation of this line with the least disruption to the existing neighborhoods. Our Memphis Boring Company is partnering with Aerobore Technology and has presented a bid that staff and our consultant feel is responsible to accomplish this work. The project is funded out of our CIP and utilities budget, and it is within our budget estimate. Our Germantown Forward 2030 and our City Services and Finances Strategic Objective number 4 requires us to provide high-quality services. And in the Economic Development Strategic Objective number 2, we're encouraged to provide investments in key commercial areas, including strategic investments in infrastructure that will facilitate private development. I can respond to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. We appreciate your presentation this evening. Is there a motion to authorize a contract with Memphis Boring Company, Incorporated, in the amount of $1,518,719 for the construction of the Western Gateway Sanitary Sewer System Project? Is there a motion?
So moved.
A motion?
Second.
Motion and a second. Alderman Owens, would you like the floor?
Yes, thanks. Just a couple of comments. I believe our agenda item tonight is about economic development, but I want to make sure this is out of the utility fund. Is that correct? Okay. And it also serves, as you mentioned, Kirby Hills and Poplar Estates, and that's going to benefit that residential sections of our city. And I heard you say, and I read in the staff report, and I understand that the developers within the Gateway will pay a pro rata share and through their development contract process to help reimburse the city for these expenses. And am I correct that I think we've previously approved this on or about this discussion, had this discussion and approved various steps, up to 5 steps or 5 times, whether it be the rezoning of the Western Gateway, the sewer basin study and asset evaluation, the sanitary sewer basin design, as well as the funding of our CIP through this FY19 budget.
Mr. Mills?
That is all correct.
Okay. I agree with your assessment that I always like to see more than one bidder, but the bid seems reasonable and in line, and so that concludes my comments.
Thank you, Alderman Owens. Alderman Yonda, do you want the floor? Go ahead.
Yes, Mayor, I would like to ask if this also includes the Traver area.
Go ahead.
Traver is already under sewerage. We did have the capacity in the existing lines to be able to handle Traver development.
Even with the additional hotels?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions by you, Alderman Yonda? Any further discussion on this particular item? Alderman Massey.
Sure. Mr. Mills, Alderman Owens said that this is about economic development, and you have said that it's going to benefit the people in some of the other neighborhoods. But at the CIP meeting, and you also said that the developers were going to pay their pro rata share of this development, but at the CIP meeting we had last year, Mr. Lawton said that this was part of a public-private partnership and the developers would not be charged fees for the sewer gateway expansion. So I'm trying to determine how you will recover the fees on a pro rata share. Are you speaking from a usage standpoint?
Mr. Mills, go ahead. Or go ahead, Mr. Lawton, either one.
Alderman Massey, I would love to see the minutes what that looks like, but I was referring to the public-private partnership that authorized the Western Gateway study to begin with, and all the players in that 50-plus acre area contributing to the Western Area Gateway, not that it would be a public-private partnership that the city would pick up the full cost of the sewer study, or sewer enhancement.
We were specifically talking about the sewer expansion, and you specifically said that it was part of a public-private partnership, and the developer would not be responsible for paying for the cost. Could the public have received the similar benefits without the extent of the increased density, which is necessitated which necessitated the funding of this sewer improvement? In other words, the expansion of the Western Gateway is what is necessitating the expansion of the sewer system. So we're claiming, or members of the board are claiming, that we're doing a favor to the neighbors downstream, but the only thing we're doing is correcting a problem that was started as a result of the density in smart growth. So isn't that true?
Rephrase your question just quickly. I know there was a lot in that. So
would this sewer expansion be necessary without the increased density associated with a smart growth project in the Western Gateway?
Thank you. Mr. Mills?
So this board approved the rezoning of the property?
You're being evasive. You're not answering my question, and my time's running out.
Just let him answer. He's going to answer your question. Go ahead and make it brief, Mr. Mills.
And all we are doing as a sewer division is responding to that need. We have to provide infrastructure for that need.
You have the floor, sir.
If developers reduce the density of their plans, the sewer system will not be overloaded, and the public will not have to pay $1.5 million. The public should not bear the cost of increasing the density in smart growth development so private developers can increase their profits. City officials knew the sewer system would be overloaded when the smart growth plan was approved for the Western Gateway. The mayor's administration has said that if aldermen refuse to approve the money for the sewer improvements, the future development may flood existing Germantown homes with sewage. Frankly, I feel like the administration is using the threat of sewer backups to coerce aldermen and the public to provide the public funding necessary to allow private developers to increase the density of their projects so the developers can make more money. Consider for a minute, if you will, how the public would review developers directly threatening to flood neighborhoods with sewage if the public refused to give them money. Why would we allow the mayor's office to become the enterprise for accomplishing the same thing that developers would never accomplish directly? I think the better solution for most of the citizens of Germantown is to require the developers to build less dense developments that will not overload the sewer system and threaten to flood the neighborhoods with sewage. Alternatively, developers can fund improvements necessary to support their private development goals without the need for public funding from other Germantown citizens. Respectfully, if developers need to make improvements in order to increase the density and uses of developments so the developers can achieve higher profits, the developers should bear the costs on the front end, not the taxpayers and not those people that are using our utilities.
Any further discussion on this particular item? Alderman Sanders.
I do have one question, Mayor. When staff's answering, is my time continuing to run, or?
You have 5 minutes on the floor, sir.
That's it. Mr. Mills, I met with you and I asked last Thursday or Friday, I don't remember, but I was looking at this diagram and it crosses the three parcels. It starts there at Carrefour and it goes across the Fogelman property and then where Trevere is. But when one of the other aldermen asked you, I think I heard you answer that Trevere is not going to connect to this sewer?
That's correct.
So they won't pay a pro rata share of this at all?
No, sir.
Which parcels would?
The parcels along Kirby Parkway and to the west from there. And it's going to depend on what comes in, Alderman. I mean, the magnitude of the development and how many gallons per minute discharge they'll have.
And that's how the pro rata share would be calculated?
Absolutely.
Is there any possibility, other than putting this sewer bypass, I'll call it, is there any possibility that we could connect to the Memphis outfall on the other side of the track or just west of Kirby Parkway? I know the city asked that years ago, 3-4 years ago. Is there any change that you know of that would allow us to save money and connect to that system?
Go ahead, Mr. Mills.
No, sir. Memphis was very clear what we could and could not do, and connecting across Poplar or connecting south across the railroad tracks was not a possibility.
So this green line is the proposed sewer. The red dotted line is the current existing sewer.
Yes,
am I correct?
Yes, sir.
In that neighborhood that I don't remember if it was you or one of the other aldermen said it would benefit these neighborhoods. Those neighborhoods, there's 100 residents in that area, but they're not going to connect to this new sewer.
No, sir, but we're protecting them. That's our goal.
So that would be a reason that I may consider voting for that, to protect those 100 residents. I would not vote to simply help a developer increase his density. I'm opposed to high density development myself, but so do you think the Fogelman property would be connected to this sewer?
I firmly believe parts of it would be. The southern side of that property would.
And why would the new phases in Trevere not connect to this?
Trevere is already piped, it's already laid, and it's already using the system. So, based on our flow monitoring, the system can handle that development.
And with that Trevere being connected there, we're anticipating a day that the hotel may be full, that we can still take that increased flow.
Based on the engineer's report.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Any further discussion on this item? Alderman Massey?
Mayor, why did Memphis say we cannot connect to their pipe?
Why don't you handle that, Bo, because you can be a little bit more technical than I can.
Yes, sir, Chairman. Memphis owns those lines. They belong to them, and they would not share their capacity with us, and that's basically what they told us.
Could this project go forward without the approval of this for the sewer expansion in the Western Gateway?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that question.
Go ahead, rephrase that again.
Can this project move forward without the approval of this sewer expansion tonight?
Well, then what you're asking is if you don't approve it tonight, no, it will not go forward. You might want to re-clarify what you asked.
No, that's exactly what I wanted you to say, Mayor, is that this vote tonight is as much about stopping the overdensity of that area as any vote we've ever cast. Because by voting against this sewer expansion, we actually stopped the Western Gateway project as it was designed under the Western Gateway Smart Growth Project.
You are correct. That was a small area plan adopted by the board through a lot of vetting, and each step has been also adopted by the board. You can vote whatever suits you, though. Go ahead, continue.
I appreciate that, Mayor. My issue largely is that city officials knew that the Western Gateway plan would overload the sewer system. And today, we're acting as if we're doing the existing citizens of Germantown a favor by passing this agenda item tonight, when in reality, what we're doing is we are forcing them to pay for the overdevelopment of Germantown, specifically the Western Gateway. It allows for uses that were never contemplated under Germantown's traditional zoning. If this Western Gateway were built out under the traditional zoning, it wouldn't allow for the uses like apartments or hotels or other dense mixed uses. So you wouldn't have the overcapacity problem with the sewage. It would be solved by the fact that there's less density contemplated in the project. And in my opinion, that is the correct course for the citizens of Germantown.
Thank you. Any other discussion on this particular item? Please call the roll.
Question, Mayor.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Mayor, I see the green line in the top left corner of our map ends right at Kirby Parkway. So will that developer have to extend the line further into his development, or how will he connect to this line?
Are you able to answer that question? I know the project, there is no project, but are you able to answer that?
Yes, Mr. Chair, what the intention is that developer would continue that line to his western property line, and he would use it to serve all of the facilities that he would construct.
And the city would not extend that further west?
That's correct.
And Mayor, am I correct? Has there been a preliminary site plan approved for Carrefour? Or did I hear that if this was not approved, they would not be able to move forward?
I don't have the answer to that. I know that there was a concept plan, I believe it's referred to, that was approved. You can just, is that accurate? Yes. So there have been nothing more than a concept. Go ahead, Alderman.
And do you anticipate, Mayor, that the administration is going to ask to continue? Did I hear that we would extend this green line parallel to that red line all the way to the outfall at a later date?
Mr. Mills?
Mr. Chair, it would be depending on what comes onto that site, what development and how many gallons per minute they generate, and we would build the system accordingly.
And can I ask, why does the new sewer represented by the green line stop at that location then if from northern going north from that point, that line can handle the additional sewer, but
Mr.
that
Mills?
short portion can't.
We contracted with Allen & Hochul to conduct the Western Gateway Basin Study. In that, they put flow monitors into the existing sewer system, and based on those flow tests, we know we can handle that capacity.
Is the size of the line different? The green?
No, sir, it's all 8-inch.
So you'll have two 8-inch lines, and the current existing one plus this new sewer converging at that point, is what
That's
you're
correct.
telling me.
That's correct.
And it won't cause problems down the line there?
Based on the studies from our engineering company.
So I'm confused. Why do you know why the study showed that those 100 homes south of the convergence can't handle it, but it can all the way to the outfall?
Go ahead.
Alderman, it has to do with slope of pipe, it has to do with depth of pipe, it has to do with carrying capacity inside the manholes on that existing stretch. Crossing the creek there at the Great Oaks Bridge is problematic. But when we get to Brookside, we've got adequate fall and flow to be able to take that sewer down to the outfall line.
And Mayor, can you tell me we're talking about pro rata share and how being calculated, and that the folks that connect to this new sewer will be paying for that. Do commercial developments, do they pay a higher rate than residential?
Mr. Mills, can you handle that?
So the development fees would be based on their gallons per minute of discharge, based on the fixtures and facilities that they have in each particular building. They will pay their pro rata share of the cost of the entire system based on that.
And would that be set from the beginning, or is it monitored throughout a course of time, and is it changed, or is it once they connect, is that the set rate from that point forward, or is it similar to a residence by usage?
Go ahead.
You're exactly right. So going forward, it would be the commercial rate for sanitary sewer based on thousands of gallons that they take through their water meter and into their building and out through the sewer system. Prior to that, as part of the development contract, our city engineer would make that determination based on the fixtures.
And is there a way for you to estimate, even by using the report or in your own opinion, the likelihood of problems in this neighborhood of 100 residents of sewage coming through these manhole covers or into the residence? Is it highly likely? Is it likely, highly likely, or not likely at all?
Sure, go ahead.
Best I can tell you is the report that we received on the Western Gateway sewer system said there would be problems.
Again, I'll just say, the only reason I would support this is to protect those residents. I do believe our commercial developments should pay their fair share, and I don't think the city ought to spend
your
a
time
large
is
amount
elapsed. Please conclude.
for them to make a profit, but that is going to be the only reason that I'm going to support this motion.
Mayor, I'd
Thank
like
you,
to
Alderman.
postpone the vote tonight.
Excuse me?
I'd like to make a motion to postpone this vote tonight.
Oh, one moment, please. Just repeat your motion for me, please.
I'd like to make a motion to postpone this vote until our next meeting.
It's been moved to postpone this vote to our next regularly scheduled Board of Mayor and Alderman meeting. Is there a second?
I'll second it. I have no problem with that at all.
So motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Is there no discussion on this?
Yeah, we're not in the main motion on this particular item. You're basically just speaking to postponement only.
Sure.
Go ahead. You have the floor.
Mayor, as you know, I requested public records relevant to the Western Gateway, and your administration never provided those documents to them. Some of those are relevant to the public-private partnership. I would also like to have time to get information about how we will recover these costs from the developers. At one time, I was told that it could take up to 20 years to recover these costs. Mr. Mills said that the cost will be recovered based on some subjective opinion about fixtures, I believe. I'm not sure that accounts for the actual flow to and from the developments, and that seems like that's fairly arbitrary, so I'd like to get an idea of exactly what standards are in place to make sure that that's applied equally, and that it will be enforced. So I think that will give Mr. Mills a little bit of time to put some of the answers tonight in writing. I have a few follow-up questions I'd like to ask him, and I'd like to ask Mr. Lawton a few questions again about the public-private partnership that he discussed at the CIP meeting. He seems to not recall that. I think I can provide him with evidence to help him with his memory, and I intend to do that. So I just ask that my colleagues respect my requests, and we postpone this vote tonight.
Thank you. Any other discussion on this particular item? Alderman Sanders.
I have no problem with postponing it. Even, you know, I said that for the reasons I said I was going to support this motion. I have no problem with even more information. It may assure me that I'm thinking in the right manner. And I'll only ask you, Mayor, if this was postponed till the next meeting, does it cause any problems? I don't see construction going on in that area, so is there any downside to postponing it?
The mayor and his administration has brought this forward, and we do not plan to withdraw our particular agenda item.
I wasn't asking you to withdraw it, Mayor. I was asking if there was a problem
as
as far as our
support-
utility system.
We do not support the amendment brought forward,
Okay, thank you.
the motion to amend.
Motion to postpone. Again, I see no downside to postponing it to allow Alderman Massey to present some additional information that might assist the rest of us in our decision.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Alderman Owens.
So it just, again, it appears to me that this is just another attempt to delay, derail.
Alderman Owens, you're out of order, please. Please stay germane to the topic at hand.
No more comments.
Any other discussion on the motion to postpone? Please call the roll.
Alderman Yonda?
No.
Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
No.
Alderman Massey?
Yes.
Alderman Owens?
Motion to postpone does not carry. We're back to the original motion on the table. The motion is to authorize a contract with Memphis Boring Company Incorporated in the amount of $1,518,719 for the construction of the Western Gateway Sanitary Sewer System Project. Any further discussion? Alderman Yonda.
I don't believe I've discussed this, to my knowledge. It's obvious that some of our aldermen do not want any economic development. It's important that we continue with the direction that we have given Mr. Mills on this sewer system. I believe that we budgeted almost $2 million for it. They come in less at this point. I'm sure it's going to cost us more. We save our citizens money with our smart growth. We save money by having development in our areas that we have that are nodes that we've set aside, small area plans, districts. All that has worked, and it's continuing to work, and it will work in saving us tax dollars. We have not gone and doubled our sales tax in the last 5 years, 6 years, because we've set back and did nothing. That's the amount that we've saved our citizens is about 35 cents on their taxes by having better sales. Now, not everything that's coming is going to be commercial, that's for sure. But this system,
Point of order, Mayor.
We have vetted this system.
Well, one moment, Alderman Yonda. What is your point of order?
Well, factually, I'm not sure that Alderman Yonda is making a true statement. We have doubled the citizens' property taxes. We may not have
the sales tax.
Hold on a moment, please.
It was confusing, and I just want to clarify.
Your point is well taken. Please conclude your comments, Alderman Yonda. I know you are speaking from the cuff on certain things. Go ahead.
Yep. We have vetted this over the years. This is something that needs to go forward. It's the right thing to do, and I'm going to be voting for it. Thank you.
Any further discussion on this item? Please call the roll.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
No.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
The motion carries and is approved.
Thank you.
Mayor and his administration appreciate the support of the board on this particular item and look forward to the work beginning. Item 12 on the agenda, PSA Supplement Number 1, Western Gateway Sewer System, CE&I, the companion piece to this. Mr. Mills?
Thank you, Mayor and Board. Chair, this agenda item is a follow-up to the previous agenda item. Our purpose with this item is to supplement the existing professional services agreement with Allen and Hoschel by $56,000, securing their expertise to provide construction inspection and engineering oversight for the contract that this board just approved, raising the total of the services contract to $245,000. The original contract with Allen & Hoschel was approved by this board on August 14, 2017 for $189,000. This supplement will allow Public Works staff to capitalize on Allen & Hoschel's expertise with grade-sensitive directional boring and help facilitate the accomplishment of this project. Allen & Hoschel will also approve all submittals and pay requests as part of this contract supplement. I can respond to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mills, for the presentation. Is there a motion to authorize charge of the professional service agreement amount for the Western Gateway Sewer Basin design, increasing the agreement amount with Allen & Hoschel Incorporated by $56,000 from $189,000 to $245,000 to include construction, engineering, and inspection services for the Western Gateway Sanitary Sewer System project? Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion? Is there a second? There's a motion and a second. Discussion on the item? Alderman Sanders.
Mayor, do we have the ability to monitor this contract in-house ourselves to save this $56,000?
Mr. Mills?
Mr. Chair, if I could defer to our city engineer.
Sure. Mr. Gwatney?
We have the capability of doing it. It's just as far as the workload, the answer is no, not at this time.
Okay, and will Allen and Hoschel be on site during the entire time of the boring, do you know, Mayor, or would they just come from time to time and monitor?
If you'd like to describe what Allen & Hoschel's services are, that would be fine, Mr. Mills.
Yes, sir, pretty much. It will not be their sole job for this inspector, but he will be coming down multiple times a day and be there for all of our progress meetings and, oversee specifically the critical portions of it, crossing Poplar Avenue and doing some of that. They will be there solidly. I respect our contractor too, and I think we have a good contractor that'll do us a good job.
But the actual work will be done by under the contract we did. This is just to monitor. Am I correct, Mayor?
Mr. Mills, yes, the supplement? Mm-hmm.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this particular item? Please call the roll.
Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
No.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Motion carries. We move to item 13 on the agenda this evening. Ordinance 2019-7, Amendment to Subdivision Ordinance, Chapter 17-60, Parkland Dedication, third and final reading. Mr. Ross.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the board. This is the third reading for the modifications to 1760 as it relates to Parkland Dedication. As we've discussed at the previous two readings, it's basically three updates to the existing ordinance. Residential projects, all residential projects being required to contribute to Parkland Dedication. That includes smart growth districts and retirement housing districts. Fees can be used on a citywide level as the city does not have parks districts as the ordinance currently reads. And then the parks director would be reviewing the preliminary design plans. There was also a proposed amendment to the ordinance that was at the second reading and public hearing. This was in part due to language that was provided by members of the BMA as well as contributed to by members, one member from the public that made a similar comment and request as part of the public hearing. And so here we are tonight at the third and final reading. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ross, for the presentation. Is there a motion to approve on third reading, Ordinance 2019-7, amendments to Section 17-60, Parkland dedication of the subdivision ordinance in the municipal code. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
A motion, is there?
Second.
There's a
I'll second
motion and a second. Vice Mayor, would you like the floor?
Yes, I would. Bear with me just a moment. As I mentioned in my liaison report, as far as the Parkland dedication, we discussed this at our last Parks and Recreation Commission meeting. Discussion as far as the role of both our commission chair and our parks director. That commission felt comfortable in the language that you see before you. And I know that I had said at our last BMA meeting that I would report back on that.
Thank you. Alderman Yonda, any comments?
Just like to thank everybody that had input in this, citizens and, of course, our Parks and Rec commissions, et cetera. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Further discussion? Alderman Massey?
Sure, Mayor. I'm not opposed to the park dedication, but I am opposed to transferring this authority from the Citizen Commission to the Parks Director, as I've mentioned in the past. It's clear based on Alderman Gibson's comments. I don't have the vote to make that amendment tonight, so I won't propose it. But I see no justification for transferring authority from the citizen-led commission to the mayor's administration. I contend the change will reduce openness, honesty, and transparency in government by allowing more decisions and discussions outside the scope of the open meetings laws. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on this particular matter? Alderman Sanders.
Mayor, I just had a question. Will the Park Commission still have a hand in looking, this ordinance says it takes it out of the hands of the commission and gives it to the park director for preliminary plans, but what about the final approval? Will our citizen commission be reviewing final plans?
Mr. Ross, do you have the answer to that question on that particular item?
Yes.
Yes, you have the answer, or yes to his question?
Both.
Oh, go ahead. Continue, please.
Yes, the Park Commission will still review anything that's germane to the parks and the business of parks.
Thank you very much, because I did, if you'll recall, mentioned the ordinance that established the Park Commission, and it said normally that no decisions would be made in the field of parks and recreation without their involvement. So I think the amendments we've made, or that Alderman Gibson offered, and our citizens are well taken, and I think we've got a good ordinance then if they're still going to have a hand in it.
Thank you, Alderman. Any further discussion? Alderman or Vice Mayor Gibson.
Thank you. I would like to just say a few other things. The word preliminary has been lost in the discussion, and it is the Parks Director's job to present the topic, describe the proposal, articulate the purpose, the solutions of options, and provide recommendations on those advantages, disadvantages, pros and cons of those possible decisions of parkland dedication projects to the Parks and Recreation Commission. She is the subject matter expert on the park master plan. The Parks Director is positioned to assist the Commission ensuring that the goals of this planning document are met and align with any recommended action. Further, when we talk about this with ECD staff, I don't see any anticipated problem, and I want to say that even though I don't know, I only know how I'm going to vote on this. And so it's important to know that when our Parks Director meets with our technical advisory committee with parkland dedication or for any other park project, that every department leader is there to collect information and to participate in those preliminary reviews of any city project, not just parkland dedication. And I believe this amended language in the ordinance describes the general process that we're currently using with all those TAC projects, and it should be left as amended. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Any further discussion on this item? Alderman Massey.
As it stands, the Park Director is currently another member of the citizen-led commission. So the only thing that is being changed here is that you're taking away the preliminary review by the citizens that is on the commission. I see no reason to do that. Why would we not trust the citizens to also have input on these decisions? rather than turning it over to an employee of the mayor to then come back to them with directions, which too often, I think, fail to get the proper consideration. Under the current changes, the Parks Director can now facilitate private meetings with the mayor or developers and then deliver what would otherwise be marching orders to the citizens on the commissions. And I am not comfortable with this. I think that it reduces our transparency. It reduces the citizens' control over this process as well. And that's, you're seeing a pattern, is what is happening is that a lot of the oversight process that has previously been held by citizens is being taken away and moved then to an employee in the mayor's administration. So there's a consolidation of power in the mayor's administration. And to me, I just think that's the wrong direction for the city. And I can't support this as long as that change remains in the Parkland dedication amendment tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any further discussion on this particular item? Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
No.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
Motion carries. It's appreciated the support that's given to the mayor and his administration. This is really good ordinance construction in the sense that we can now capture all development in our city for dedication of parkland or payment in lieu of. So kind of close all those somewhat loopholes from a development standpoint. Item 14 on the agenda, ordinance 2019-8, amendment to the Vegetation Ordinance, Chapter 22, Tree Preservation and Planting Requirements, third and final reading. Mr. Ross.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the board. Again, we find ourselves at third reading for amendment to the Vegetation Ordinance at Chapter 22. This is an update to the existing ordinance that establishes the payment in lieu of tree dedication for tree replacement and reduces the need for developers to ask for waivers, and also provides a cap to that payment with the independent arborist report that is at the discretion of the Design Review Commission and at the expense of the applicant. We had our first reading on February 25th. This was approved with no changes. There was no discussion as part of the public hearing in terms of citizen engagement, and no additional changes were made by the board at the second reading and public hearing on March 25th, and we find ourselves at the third and final reading tonight. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Is there a motion to approve on third and final reading, ordinance 2019-8, amendments to section 22-107 and 108 for the tree preservation and planting requirements of the vegetation ordinance in the municipal code? Is there a motion?
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second by Vice Mayor Gibson. Okay. Alderman Owens, would you like the floor?
Thank you. I made my
Alderman
comments.
Gibson, would you like the floor?
No, sir.
Hearing.
Discussion's open. Anyone? Alderman Massey?
Sure, Mayor. In my opinion, this amendment is for the benefit of developers rather than the broader public. If the current ordinance were enforced, developers would have an incentive to preserve large trees. This ordinance encourages developers to clear-cut trees and simply pay a fee rather than finding ways to preserve the larger, older trees in developments. The ordinance also provides little meaningful standards for determining the replacement cost of the older, large trees. I think the standards are so vague that there is no means of assuring notice or equal enforcement. Ultimately, it appears the entire ordinance can be negated based on the subjective opinion of DRC members. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman. Any further discussion on this item? Alderman Owens.
Yes, I have to just disagree with my colleague in that there's little understanding here of what's going on with the development process. And on one hand, we want to give power to our Parks Commission, but yet you don't want to have power in the Design Review Commission's hands. And I just don't understand that. Not only that, there's an arborist who has to make a professional opinion to the Design Review Commission. We have a lot of great developers that do come into Germantown and want to save trees, and now we have a way to capture the fees or get additional revenue from those who want to develop in a responsible manner. And if they don't want to develop in a responsible manner, then the Design Review Commission is going to tell them to go away. And so those are my comments.
Thank you, Alderman. Any further discussion on this item? Alderman Sanders.
Mr. Chairman, do you know if the tree board considered this and if they agreed to this amendment or text amendment?
Mr. Ross, did the tree board have a gander at this?
The tree board looked at this as late as December 11th and as early as August 14th of 2018. So they've discussed it, they've seen it, and they also spoke about it at their, or they received an update from staff at their February 12th, 2019 meeting prior to the first reading.
Thank you. That's in your report. I appreciate it. Go ahead, Alderman Sanders.
Mr. Chair, do you know if they provided a recommendation to the BMA?
Was there a recommendation from that body, Mr. Ross?
Ms. Goraleski is staff representative to the tree board.
Thank you. The tree board did have a working group that reviewed many of the iterations of the ordinance and along with the last one, and it was their comments that were brought into the last revision that you saw.
Okay, but they took no vote, so to speak,
No,
to
they're
say
just
we support or don't support.
Correct. They're an advisory board. So they don't actually make formal recommendations.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion on this particular item? Vice Mayor?
Mr. Ross, as far as the tree board, it's an advisory board for public lands, correct? Public trees on public property.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on this particular item?
Mayor, sure.
Alderman Massey?
I'll speak to Alderman Sanders if you don't mind. I was recently appointed the Alderman Liaison to the tree board just in 2019, so I wasn't present for those meetings, but Alderman Gibson makes a good point. The tree board only provides oversight of issues relevant to trees on public property. And so this ordinance is really outside the scope of what the tree board would consider. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I proposed at the first meeting was that the tree board make a recommendation to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen to expand the scope of our responsibilities so that we can also provide advice and recommendations to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen on issues relevant to trees on private property in addition to those on, for example, our parkland. But the other thing I'd like for you to know is that when I met with the tree board for the first time, some of the issues that I've raised with the Board of Mayor and Aldermen were never considered by the members of the tree board. They basically take the recommendations that are presented to them based on their skill set and make a decision. They don't, that skill set doesn't always allow them to contemplate the broad scope that we might consider here as a board of mayor and aldermen. For example, they had not considered the issues relevant to vagueness. They had not considered the fact that we lose our canopy by cutting large oak trees, but then allowing a developer to replace them with a dogwood or multiple dogwoods, for example. So there were many things that they had not even contemplated in their work sessions, and the limited ability they had to provide input into this amendment. And again, it was very limited. It was not a vote that was taken. It was, I think, more for the board to say that they had input. That it was not as extensive as we might expect from what we would characterize as a tree board, particularly in involvement with an ordinance of this impact on the city. So thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Of course, as you mentioned, you weren't there for that meeting, just for the record to state. Alderman Sanders?
I thank Alderman Massey and Alderman Gibson for their clarification. The reason for my question, Chair, was I believe, if I'm not misunderstood, prior to these text amendments, they had to replace the trees somewhere within the city. We may end up with trees we didn't need on public property. This ordinance gives them an ability to pay an in lieu of fee that we could use to take care of our current trees or plant if we decided we needed it, and that's why I asked.
That is a correct statement.
other than the point about taking care of our current trees, that the payment in lieu of dedication is meant only for new trees?
Correct. I stand corrected, and thank you.
Any other further discussion on this particular item? Please call the roll.
Alderman Owens,
Yes.
Alderman Yonda.
Yes.
Alderman Sanders,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson,
Yes.
Alderman Massey,
No.
The motion carries and the item is adopted. Appreciate the board's support on this. This is a good way to strengthen our tree canopy, continue our role as a Tree City USA as well. Item 15 on the agenda, ordinance number 2019-9, amendments to Chapter 2, Article 6, Division 2, purchasing, third and final reading. Ms. Pfeiffer.
Thank you, sir. Tonight, I'm going to be going over the ordinance readings that we've had. The first reading on this ordinance item was February 25th, 2019. Was approved with one requested change from Alderman Sanders, which we did put in there. The second reading and public hearing on March 25th was approved with no changes. Also, there was a public meeting held with no comments or any additional items put in there from the citizens. So I'm putting before you tonight the third and final reading on this item with no additional changes, no things. So it's basically up for you to ask me questions now.
Thank you, Ms. Pfeiffer, and I would just add to that as well that just keep in mind, board, in 2007 when the adjustment was made after state law was modified, the city at that time went from 2,500 to 10,000. That's roughly 4 times the amount of the procurement dollar amount. In this particular situation in 2015, the state changed the law to 25,000, and I think Ms. Pfeiffer and her capable staff decided to take those 3.5 years to determine whether that was something that our city needed. The new standard is exactly 2.5 times the provision that we currently have, and it also keeps us very competitive with our contractor base in the community. Is there a motion to approve ordinance 2019-9 with the proposed amendments to modify Chapter 2, Article 6, Division 2, purchasing of the Germantown Code of Ordinances? Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Alderman Yonda, would you like the floor?
I'm just good with this. Thank you for all your input, and thank you for your packet with everything of our guidelines in it.
Thank you.
Alderman Gibson.
Ms. Pfeiffer, I wanted to thank you for the time that we spent together on first and second reading. I do feel comfortable with this new ordinance change. And in looking over the administrative policy and procedures manual, I made it about 3/4 of the way through. And
thank you.
God bless you, is
Thank
what
you.
I would say. I appreciate you being really good at your job. I appreciate the team that you have assembled and the work that y'all do. With a team of 4, the number of, they're not.
Purchase orders.
Thank you. The number of purchase orders that go across your desk, it is a well-oiled machine. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Further discussion, Alderman Sanders.
I too want to thank staff for the hard work that they've done. Thank the board here for going along with the changes I made at the first reading. I will have to say I came tonight with kind of sitting on the fence on this ordinance. The second reading, I voted no, but in light of our newly created preliminary agenda, I don't think at this time that I can support the increase to 25,000. I did, as I said in the first reading, through MTAS, I found numerous cities that did raise the allowable limit within our area and across the state, but there's also states that did not take advantage of making that change. So I think with the change, if this was passed, we have the ability, or the administration has the ability to put things on this newly created preliminary agenda that won't allow us to fully discuss those items or look at them as closely as we could previously with our other items. I don't believe it's going to be detrimental to the city because Ms. Pfeiffer was very gracious in answering a lot of my questions on the phone and on email, and in addition to herself, she has 3 individuals in the city who can process these procurements. Between FY14 and 19, there were only 7, average of 7 per year. So with those things in mind, I don't think I'll be able to support it tonight, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman. Further discussion on this item? Alderman Massey?
Ms. Pfeiffer, I have found you to be a perfectionist, and I admire that about you. I've noticed. But I also want to make a quick statement, is that when I'm arguing these points, the arguments that I make aren't directed toward you personally. I may very well trust you implicitly to carry out your job to the best of your abilities in an honest, transparent way. But ultimately, I also recognize that you work directly for the city administrator, and he works for the mayor. And ultimately, you're an employee, so you have to take direction sometimes. So from my perspective, the administration wants less oversight and greater freedom to make decisions about how to spend public money. But the record from the last 2 meetings failed to convince me that the public will benefit from these changes. I don't believe the majority of citizens would support the increased spending limits, so I must vote no. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Massey. Any further discussion? Alderman Owens.
Yeah, Lisa, Ms. Pfeiffer, if you don't mind, could you, and let me back up, appreciate the time you took to meet with me as well and answer most of my questions throughout these readings. Remind me again the municipalities around us that are utilizing this.
Go ahead, Ms. Pfeiffer.
Okay. Actually, if you'll indulge me, I do have a chart up here for the next one. We actually have kind of gone in between both of my items for tonight. But this is a comparison chart of the Municipal Technical Advisory Services assisted me with this and actually did a survey for me. They did the survey, I didn't do it. We did add some information on there because we did contact these folks individually to ask what full-time mayor, part-time mayor, and demographics on that. And as you can see, with the exception of Bartlett, there's a little exception of Bartlett right at the top up there, that's the only one on there that actually has a mayor actually approving that. The rest of them have got differing things in there, but basically it comes down to all of them are doing the same process. And so if you look at the demographics, you look at the 25,000, with the exceptions of Clarksville, which is a large base but small group, and then also look at Knoxville, the rest of them, we're all in those same demographics. And if you look at Chattanooga, obviously they've got 11 people on there, but then if you look down through there, 2, 3, 4, 1 people, it's more efficient for us to be able to allow for the type of purchases that we're asking for. So we're not, as Alderman Sanders stated before, this is not a ton of items that are in there. It allows for efficiency, and I think our citizens would want us to be more efficient in how we're doing things because efficiencies do save money. I'll go back actually to the previous one. I don't know if that answered your question.
Alderman Owens?
You did. Thank you very much.
Alderman Yonda.
These are items that are budgeted items that we've approved, correct?
Yes, sir. We cannot make a purchase or a requisition without having a budget to do it.
Okay. The next question I have is, those items that are under 10,000, we get a report.
Yes, sir.
You're going to continue, and I'm repeating this because I think I've repeated it each time we brought it up. You're going to continue giving us a report on those that are 10,000 to 25,000, and you're actually going to be doing a bid process on those items.
We'll be doing a formal quoting process on those items.
Quoting process. The deal is we don't have to take per the guidelines of the state because it's under 25,000.
The difference in this is the 25,000 establishes a public competitive bidding threshold.
Right.
So anything between that 10 and 25 is a written formal quote. What it will mean is that procurement will handle that process between 10 and 24 There won't be any rogue spending, or they will follow the guidelines that are put in that manual there, and we will make sure that that happens. And then anything over 25 comes to this board, just like we've done in the past. We just basically overlaid and changed the dollar amount.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this item? Please call the roll.
Alderman Yonda,
Yes.
Alderman Sanders,
No.
Vice Mayor Gibson,
Yes.
Alderman Massey,
No.
Alderman Owens.
Yes.
Motion carries. We do appreciate the support of the board on this particular item. I will just quickly state that there is currently legislation in Nashville to raise those thresholds to $50,000, and I'm looking at Ms. Piefer. We would not expect, if that were to pass, we would use the same amount of time to make sure that's something that we would look at hard and fast before following the state's lead. With that said, that takes us to item 16 on the agenda, Resolution 19R04, Procurement Administration or Administrative Policies and Procedures. Ms. Piefer?
Mayor, this is the accompanying item that we have from the ordinance. The ordinance establishes that we do a resolution provide a resolution to this board identifying all the policies and procedures that we will utilize to ensure that these procedures are followed. And I believe every one of you have gotten our manual. How we compile the information for that manual is we used our local and state laws. We crafted everything in there based on our local and state laws. We also used best practices and information from MTAS and then other comparable cities across our state. As we discussed earlier, the format that we used, we pulled all this information from the MTAS, and we're going to be similar to everybody across our state. So we'll be doing the same type of purchasing. I wanted to give you a little bit. I know that's not a great screen. I guess I should have used a different color. But this actually shows you the organizational chart. I'm not going to shy away from it. This actually tells you exactly what the procedures are and what we'll be doing and everything that goes through that. Informal quotes will be the 4,000 to 10,000. There will be quotes. There will not be a situation where we will not have quotes. They will not go through our office unless they do. The next item, 10,000 to 24, will be formal written quotes. That's the process that Alderman Yonda discussed a few minutes ago. Competitive sealed bids, which would be construction services, products and services, as well as competitive sealed proposals, which would be RFPs, and requests for proposals will come to this board. Anything over $25,000 will come to this board for approval. However, before it gets any further, it goes to go through our office and go through a bid process to do so, which means we advertise it. A sole source, single source, you'll see that all of those are noted because all of those can be within those parameters. We could use from between $4,000 and $10,000. We could go use a cooperative for that because it would be beneficial in using those volume pricings. But procurement staff, as Alderman Gibson stated before, those POs or those requisitions go through our staff and go through our approvals. I can assure you that based on my ethical standards and based on our procurement standards, we do not want to break the law, and we will not. State laws and the laws of this city are very important to us. So, yeah, I think that would be it.
Thank you for your presentation this evening. Ms. Piefer, is there a motion to adopt by resolution 19R04, Procurement Administrative Policies and Procedures in accordance with the adopted amendments to Ordinance 2019-9, amendments to Chapter 2, Article 6, Division 2, Purchasing?
So moved.
There's a motion.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Alderman Sanders, would you like the floor?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Ms. Piefer. Although I've voted no on the amendment change, I agree that we have to have policies and procedures. It's 105 pages long, as Alderman Gibson said. I believe it's a good manual. It's a lot of work. I know y'all worked hard on it, and thank you for doing that. So I will support this resolution because I do believe we need to have policies and procedures that comply with our ordinances. And even though I didn't pass on that, I appreciate you for your work and your staff, and fully support this resolution.
Thank you,
sir.
Alderman. Alderman Yonda, you like the floor?
No, just thank you again.
Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Sure, ma'am.
Alderman Massey?
I appreciate Alderman Sanders' perspective on this. However, I think if we don't adopt this, the procurement administration policies and procedures would simply revert to the current policy and procedures, which would negate the previous vote, essentially. So by voting against this manual, you could actually reclaim the previous agenda item by forcing the administration to follow the current procurement administration policies and procedures. And for that reason, I will be voting against the resolution 19R04 procurement administration policies and procedures, and recommend that we simply continue to operate under the current procurement administrative policies and procedures, which have lower thresholds.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
No.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Thank you for all your work on the manual, and we look forward to you putting it in action. That takes us to item 17 on the agenda, which was formerly item 9B on the consent agenda. Change order number 3, Forest Hill Irene Road improvements. Mr. Lawton or Mr. Gwatney, who's making this presentation?
I'll make the presentation, Mayor.
Mr. Lawton?
And rely on my friend, Mr. Gwaltney, to come in and assist. Let me get my notes here real quick. Construction on the Forest Hill Irene Road project, the widening project there between Poplar Pike and Winchester, began in early FY19, and this followed a very successful bond issue in the amount of approximately $34 million. That bond issue went for the construction of the new elementary school and for the widening and improvements to Forest Hill Irene Road in that area. Traffic demands were pushing the need for the road improvement to begin with, but with the school going on that side on Forest Hill, it really became a necessity to make improvements for the ingress and egress of the buses and the families dropping their kids off at school. Included in the construction of the roadway was an upgrade to the water line to provide water service, enhanced water service, increase the pressure and the water flows in that area along Forest Hill Irene Road, not only for existing residents, but absolutely for the new school. And so the change order before you deals with enhancements and improvements to or changes rather, to the water installation and the connection of that water line in Forest Hill Irene Road to the individual residential meters that are along the way. There was an amount originally budgeted in the contract for this, but it was more of a copper splicing from the water line to the new water meters that are being set as a result of it. As a result of this, and that was the way it was designed. That was the way it was designed, and that was the way it was bid. After consultation with city staff, our people on site, our engineers, Mr. Gwaltney, Mr. Mills, and with the contractor, it was recommended that, and this is a service add. This is an enhancement to the project, an enhancement to the residents in that area, that we, rather than simply spice that copper line to the brand new water meters, that we install a brand new copper line from the feed to the new water meters, and that's what this addresses. There was approximately, I think, over $10,000 in the original bid that was allocated for what we thought would be the way to fix that. But again, you get into a project, you look at how we can enhance the project. This is an enhancement for the neighbors in that area, and so that's why we brought it forward as a change order to the board in the amount of $21,304.60.
Thank you, Mr. Lawton. Is there a motion to approve change order number 3 in the amount of $21,304.60, increasing the construction contract for the Forest Hill Irene Roadway Improvement Project with Acuff Enterprises DBA Scott Contractors from $6,151,416.55 to $6,151,416.55 $172,721.15. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
So motion and a second. Alderman Yonda, would you like the floor?
Yes, this is still within budget, correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor, would you like the floor?
If I could, just simply, Mr. Ross, I know that when we had discussed this, and I'll be very brief, the reason for this this change order was because when we initially bid this out, we thought that the materials would be okay, but when the copper line was exposed, it was in the best interest of the project to make this change, correct?
Mr. Gwatney or Mr. Ross?
Thank you, Mr. Gwatney, or Mr. Ross.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
That's correct, yes.
I appreciate that.
Any further discussion on this item? Alderman Massey?
So, Mr. Gwaltney, can you just elaborate on that?
Yes, sir. A lot of the homes down there, after further investigation, some of these water lines have been in service for over 40 years. Also, they are typically 3/4 inch diameter versus today's standard, which is an inch diameter. When we're looking at new construction of the roadway, just decided, or at least decided to bring forward to you the idea of making the water services as brand new as possible, and we think this is the way to do that.
So I guess my question would be, why didn't the developers contemplate this on the front end? I mean, we would have known that it was 3/4 pipe initially. I mean, the plans would have shown that. So why was this not contemplated before the job was bid?
Mr. Gwaltney, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, now, we're not talking about new subdivisions. Some of these homes down there, like I said, are 40 and 50 years old. Those are the ones we're talking about replacing.
I think the question would be quickly summarized, why did we not just settle for the 3/4?
And again, the original plan was to splice onto that existing 3/4 inch line with a reducer or an expander to 1 inch, and then go from that point on with an inch. That's one way of doing it, and it's quite frankly a Band-Aid way of doing it. We, again, think this is a much better product.
Thank you.
Well, I'm not opposed to making decisions that make a project better, and sometimes there are unforeseen circumstances that necessitate a change order. But at the same time, as I have said previously, sometimes I think that if we're not careful, it becomes unfair to the previous contractors who bid on projects and might have contemplated some of these issues, and for whatever reason they get overlooked. The other thing that occurs a lot in construction is anytime a developer or a contractor uses change orders, they often build in a higher profit margin in those change orders. And so when we miss these things on the front end during the bidding process or the pre-bidding process, it costs the taxpayers money. And so that's one of the reasons I always like to have these items pulled from consent and discussed as part of the regular agenda, because I want to know the full process of how we got here. It sounds like to me in this case, maybe we just discovered that it would be better to do it this way. And when that happens, I'm okay with it. And so I'll be voting yes tonight.
Any further discussion on this item? Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
Yes.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
Thank you.
The motion carries. We have approval. We've reached the conclusion of our agenda this evening. We do appreciate leadership Germantown for, hopefully you get extra credit for tonight. So thank you. Drive home safely. We are adjourned.
Nancy, thank you for coming. Thank you for coming.